Some stories grip you because they expose the darkest impulses we hide from ourselves. Greed, lust, the cold calculation that murder can be profitable. This is a third-person retelling of Double Indemnity by James M. Cain, told from my own narrative perspective, not a word-for-word reading. A razor-sharp tale of deception and doom, inspired by the infamous 1927 Ruth Snyder murder case. Cain, then a New York journalist, watched that real-life scandal unfold. A housewife and her lover plotting to kill her husband for insurance money. A bungled crime that became tabloid sensation. He transformed it into this gripping fiction, exploring how ordinary people convince themselves that betrayal and violence are justified. First serialized in Liberty magazine in 1936 and published as a standalone novella in 1943, Double Indemnity has endured for decades as a cornerstone of noir literature, with its influence and enduring popularity seen through countless editions and reprints worldwide. Its author, James M. Cain, is a master of hard-boiled crime fiction, best known for groundbreaking works like The Postman Always Rings Twice and Mildred Pierce, which also became iconic films and defined the genre's unflinching look at human weakness. The story reached even greater fame when it was adapted into the 1944 film Noir classic, directed by Billy Wilder, with a screenplay co-written by Wilder and Raymond Chandler, starring Barbara Stanwyck and Fred MacMurray in unforgettable roles that helped launch the golden age of noir. The visuals you'll see are created by today's technology. They might not be perfectly accurate to the 1930s to 1940s scenes or exact details, but they'll help you visualize the atmosphere, characters, and tension. So bear with my request on that. By the end, you may find yourself questioning how far you'd go when desire overrides reason, and whether any scheme is truly foolproof. And at the end, I'll share fascinating facts about the book, its real-life roots, details from the legendary film adaptation, behind-the-scenes insights, and a few fun discoveries most readers overlook. The story begins. Walter Huff felt the wheel steady under his palms as he swung the car off the Glendale Road and pointed it toward Hollywoodland, the renewal nagging at him like an unpaid bill. 3 new truck drivers had just gone onto the brewery bond without a hitch, but this one policy, Nerdlinger's automobile coverage, was ticking closer to expiration, and he hated letting them lapse. The house appeared ahead, perched awkwardly on the slope like so many California Spanish places thrown together without much thought. White stucco walls catching the late light, red tiles glowing on the roof, a patio shoved to one side. Nothing about it screamed murder or headlines. It looked ordinary, expensive, in a careless way. The garage tucked underneath, the rest of the room spilling uphill in lazy tears. He killed the engine, climbed the stone steps to the front door, and rang. A servant's face appeared in the crack. Wary, professional. He gave his name when she asked, kept the business vague. Personal, he said. The word hung there, thin and unconvincing even to him. She hesitated, explained they weren't supposed to admit anyone without details. He felt the familiar squeeze. Push too hard and he'd sound suspicious. Explain too much and the door would close politely in his face. Every sale lived or died on that first threshold. He backed off instead, made it casual. Mentioned he'd promised Nerdlinger he'd drop by sometime. Old acquaintance tone, just a touch of hurt at the cold shoulder. It landed. The woman's expression softened into worry. She stepped aside. Inside, he tossed his hat onto the sofa and took the room in one sweep. Standard California living room. Nothing special. Heavy Spanish furniture that looked better than it felt. A big Oakland-made rug pretending to be Mexican. Red velvet drapes on iron rods. Tapestries of coats of arms and castles tacked up like afterthoughts. Department store delivery, credit approved, same day. Windows on two walls, hallway opening on the others, nothing to write home about, nothing to fear. Then she was there. A woman stood in the entrance to the hall. Small, maybe 31, dusty blonde hair, light blue eyes that seemed tired behind the sweetness of her face. Blue house pajamas clung softly, giving her a faintly washed-out look. She asked what he wanted. He explained he was looking for Mr. Nerdlinger. She said her husband wasn't home, but she was Mrs. Nerdlinger. Could she help? No choice now but to lay it out. He introduced himself. Walter Huff, General Fidelity of California, said the auto policy was nearing renewal, that he'd promised a reminder and happened to be nearby. He kept it light, apologetic for bothering her in the daytime. She repeated the word coverage, uncertain. He clarified. Collision, fire, theft, liability, the usual. Routine, he emphasized, but important to handle before it ran out. She mentioned the automobile club. Her husband had been thinking about their insurance. Walter nodded. Careful. Never knock the competition. He agreed they were prompt. Fair on claims, courteous. Cheaper, too, if you were already a member for the roadside help, the ticket service, all that. Otherwise, the membership fee ate the savings. He could still beat their rate for Nerdlinger, he added. She kept the conversation moving, but something in her tone felt off, rehearsed. He'd sold enough policies to sense it. She wasn't interested in the automobile club. Not really. Her husband might have been, but she was stalling, circling something else. A commission split, maybe. A quiet $10 for steering the business her way without the husband knowing. It happened more than people admitted. He weighed how to shut that down politely when she moved, and the blue pajamas shifted over a figure that hit him low and hard, scattering every ethical argument he'd rehearsed. Then she looked straight at him. A cold prickle raced up his spine and lifted the hair on his neck. "Do you handle accident insurance?" she asked. The question landed like ice water. Accident was never bought, it was sold. People called for fire, for theft, even life, but accident? Only when someone wanted it placed, and when dirty work was in the air, accident came up first. Biggest payout for the premium, no exam required, no need for the insured to know a thing. Plenty of men walked around worth far more to their families dead than alive, and never suspected it. He answered evenly. They handled all kinds, while fighting to keep his gaze level. She circled back to the automobile club. He tried not to stare. Couldn't entirely. She sat. Would he like her to speak to Mr. Nerdlinger about this? It would save time, she said. He agreed, though the offer puzzled him. Why would she handle her husband's insurance talk? Still, he went along. Tomorrow night, she suggested. 7:30 after dinner. He accepted. She said she'd expect him. He walked back to the car, cursing himself for letting one sidelong glance rattle him. By the time he reached the office, the self-reproach had faded to irritation. Keys had been looking for him. The claims head was sprawled behind his desk, collar undone, sweating, the usual storm cloud of temper and paperwork around him. Keys could turn any simple fact into a 3-act debate, cross-checking calendars, almanacs, printer credits, anything to prove a point. Yet no one sniffed out a crooked claim faster. The roar started the second. Walter stepped in. A truck policy from 6 months back, the owner had torched it and filed. Walter cut through the noise. He remembered the case perfectly. He'd attached a memo himself, warning the risk-needed investigation. The man's face hadn't sat right. Keys waved the memo, right there on the desk. He wasn't complaining, he said. He was praising. If other departments had shown half Walter's instinct, even after ignoring the warning and issuing anyway, they'd have paid out if Keys hadn't sent a tow truck that afternoon. Shavings under the engine? Clear arson. The driver confessed. Plea tomorrow. Case closed. Keyes kept going, building to indignation. If Walter could spot trouble just looking at the applicant, why couldn't underwriting? He was firing off a memo to Norton, maybe even the president. The whole company needed to look at itself. Though if the president had half a brain... Walter listened, the day's tension easing into the familiar rhythm of Keyes' outrage, already half dreading tomorrow night. Walter Huff let Keyes run down on his own, face blank, giving nothing away. The older man's jab at young Norton, the president who'd inherited the chair from his father, hung in the air like smoke from a bad cigar. Keyes had been around since the founder's days, and he never missed a chance to remind everyone how the sun fell short. Walter knew better than to feed the feud. If Norton was the boss they had to answer to, then Norton was the boss. No point in letting Keyes drag him into the crossfire. He kept his expression neutral, pretending he hadn't caught the reference at all. Back in his own office, Nettie was already gathering her things to leave. She said goodnight with her usual brisk cheer. He returned it. Then she paused at the door to mention the memo on his desk. Mrs. Nerdlinger had called 10 minutes earlier. The visit tomorrow night would be inconvenient after all. She'd let him know when to come instead. He thanked her, watched her go, then stood staring down at the slip of paper. A cold certainty settled in his gut. If that application ever came through, if any application came through, he already knew the exact warning he clipped to it, assuming there ever was one. 3 days passed before the message arrived. Come at 3:30. She opened the door herself this time, no servant in sight. The blue pajamas were gone. Instead, she wore a crisp white sailor suit. The blouse fitted snug across her hips, white shoes and stockings completing the picture. She carried the knowledge of her own body the way some women carried expensive jewelry, aware, deliberate, unafraid to let it show. They moved into the living room. A tea tray waited on the table. Belle's day off, she explained. She was making tea for herself. Would he join her? He declined politely, kept it short. He'd only stay a minute, he said, assuming Mr. Nerdlinger had decided to renew since she'd summoned him. The words came out steady, but inside he registered the convenience of the maid's absence, the casual tea setup. Every instinct screamed to take whatever decision there was and get clear of the house, renewal or no renewal. She insisted on the tea anyway. It broke up the afternoon, she said. He tried a light tease. Must be English then. No, native Californian, she answered. Rare breed. He shot back. Most Californians came from Iowa. He was from there himself. Think of that, she said. The white suit tipped the balance. He sat. She poured. Lemon? No. Sugar? None. Straight? No sweet tooth? She smiled then, showing big white teeth, slightly bucked. He mentioned doing business with the Chinese. They'd cured him of the American habit of sugaring tea. She loved the Chinese, she said. Bought all her chow mein ingredients from Mr. Ling near the park. Did he know him? Years, he replied. Her brow creased in surprise, and he saw the freckles across her forehead clearly now, the real reason for that washed-out look. She caught him staring. You're looking at my freckles, she said. He admitted he liked them. She didn't. He did. She used to wrap a turban around her head in the sun to hide them, but people kept stopping her, asking for fortunes. Never learned the California trick, she added. Anyway, he liked the freckles. She settled beside him on the sofa. They talked about Mr. Ling, the Chinese grocer who moonlighted at City Hall and needed a small bond every year. In conversation, he became a character worth knowing. Eventually, Walter steered back to business. What about the policies? She said her husband was still mentioning the automobile club, but she believed he'd renew with General Fidelity. Relief flickered through him. She sat quiet a moment, fingers making tiny pleats in the edge of her blouse, smoothing them out again. She hadn't mentioned the accident insurance to him, she said, hated to bring it up. Walter understood. It felt wrong, he agreed, suggesting a man ought to have coverage, especially in his line of work. Los Angeles rep for Western Pipe and Supply, office in the petroleum building, but mostly out in the oil fields. Dangerous work, knocking around rigs. Made her sick to think about it. Did the company carry anything on him? Not that she knew. A man in that business shouldn't take chances. He decided to test the water, freckles or no freckles. How about if he spoke to Mr. Nerdlinger himself? Brought it up casually. No mention of where the idea came from. She hated the thought of discussing it with him. If he asked her opinion, she wouldn't know what to say. It worried her sick. Her fingers worked the fabric again. Then, after a long silence, the question slipped out. Could she take out a policy for him without his knowledge? She had her own small allowance. She could pay the premium quietly. He'd never have to know, but the worry would lift. 15 years in the business had taught him exactly what that meant. He crushed his cigarette into the ashtray, muscles coiling to stand, to leave, to drop every thread connected to her like burning coal. But he didn't move. She looked at him, startled, her face suddenly close, 6 inches, maybe less. Instead of walking away, he slid an arm around her, drew her in, and kissed her hard on the mouth. Tremors ran through him like current. She stared coldly for a beat. Then her eyes closed, her arms came around him, and she kissed back with equal force. She murmured she'd liked him from the start. He didn't believe it. Hadn't she invited him to tea? Hadn't she arranged for the maid to be gone? She'd felt it the first minute, the way he stayed so solemn about the company rules, the policies, all of it. That was why she teased him about the automobile club. He rumpled her hair. They both fussed with the pleats in her blouse. She corrected his technique, had to take the right amount each time, turn, crease. He'd get the hang of it, he said. Not now, though. He had to go. Soon? Maybe. He pressed. Belle wasn't off every day. She'd let him know. Don't call her, she warned. She'd reach out. Promise. All right. One more kiss goodbye. He drove home to the bungalow in the Los Feliz Hills under a darkening sky. The Filipino houseboy had left for the day. Rain started tapping the windows as he built a fire and sat staring into the flames, trying to map his position. He knew precisely where he stood, balanced on the lip of a drop, staring down into black water. Every rational part of him shouted to back away, to run, to never return. Yet even as he rehearsed the escape, something inside leaned forward, hungry for a clearer view of the fall. A little before 9, the bell rang. He recognized the sound instantly. She stood on the porch in a raincoat and rubber swimming cap. Raindrops caught in the light across her freckles. He helped her out of the wet layers. Underneath was a simple sweater and slacks. Ordinary Hollywood casual, but on her it carried different weight. He led her to the fire. He sat beside her. How had she found his address? The question jumped out. He didn't want her asking around the office. Phone book, she said simply. Surprised? No. She laughed at his calm. Such conceit. Was her husband out? Long Beach, new, we're going in, 3 shifts. He'd had to go down. So she'd taken a bus. He might at least say he was glad to see her. They talked about the rain, how wet everything was, how they hoped it wouldn't flood like that New Year's Eve back in '34. He'd drive her back later, he offered. She gazed into the fire a long time. She'd lost her head that afternoon, she said. Not much, he answered. A little. Sorry? A little. She'd never done anything like that since she'd been married. That was why she'd come tonight. He pointed out nothing much had actually happened. Something had, she insisted, she'd lost her head. That counted. She just wanted to say, she didn't mean it? No, she did mean it. If she hadn't meant it, she wouldn't have come all this way. But she needed him to understand it wouldn't happen again. Ever. He asked if she was sure. Quite sure. Maybe they should test that. No, please. She loved her husband. More lately than ever. Walter Huff stared into the fire, the flames licking low and steady, mirroring the slow burn inside him. He knew he should walk away right then, cut it clean while the damage was still small. But the pull was stronger, that same dark gravity drawing him nearer to the brink, step by unwilling step. He felt it again, the same misalignment he'd sensed from their first meeting. Her words didn't match what lay underneath. She was holding something back, always had been, and the certainty of it gnawed until he couldn't let it pass. "Why here lately?" he asked. She answered with one word. "Worry." He pressed. Did she mean some rainy night in the oil fields? A crown block crashing down on him? She begged him not to talk like that. But that was the picture, wasn't it? Yes, she admitted. He understood. He said, especially with this setup. She didn't follow. What setup? A crown block would fall. Would what? Fall on him. She pleaded again. Please, it wasn't funny. It made her sick with worry. What made him say that? He looked straight at her. She was going to drop a crown block on him. Or something like it. Something arranged to look accidental. Something that would leave him dead. The words struck her like a slap. Her eyes flickered, caught off guard. She needed a moment to recover, to assemble whatever mass she could manage. Was he joking? No. He must be crazy then. She'd never heard of such a thing. He wasn't crazy, wasn't joking, and she had heard of it, hadn't thought of much else since they met. It was why she'd come here tonight. She rose, insisting she wouldn't listen to this. She was leaving. Right now. He let her say it, let her repeat it. He didn't move to help her with her coat, didn't offer to drive her back. He treated her like a stray that had wandered in from the alley, cold, distant. Yet even as she walked out into the rain, he knew the truth. The rain would still fall tomorrow night. The drilling would continue in Long Beach. He would light the same fire, sit in the same chair, and a little before 9, the bell would ring again. She arrived without a word. They sat by the fire in silence for a full 5 minutes, the crackle of logs the only sound between them. Then she broke it, voice low and strained. How could he have said those things to her last night? Because they were true. That was exactly what she planned to do. Even now? After what he'd said? Yes, even now. She'd come back tonight because she'd thought it over. One or two things she'd said might have given the wrong impression. She was almost grateful he'd pointed them out. She might have repeated them to someone else without realizing how they'd be taken. But now that she understood, surely he could see that any notion of that kind was finished. Forever. He read the fear behind the words. She'd spent the day terrified he would tip her husband or set some chain in motion she couldn't stop. He kept the pressure on. She'd called him Walter. What was her name? Phyllis. Phyllis, he said. She seemed to think that because he could name it, she wouldn't go through with it. But she would. And he was going to help her. Her surprise was raw this time. No attempt at a performance. Help her? Impossible. He told her the hard fact. She couldn't do it alone. Not against an insurance company. One person might dream of pulling it off clean. No witnesses, no leaks. But it never worked that way. She needed someone who knew the game from the inside, someone who understood exactly how the company hunted for fraud. Why would he do it? Her, for one. And money. She stared at him. He would betray his own company, help her kill her husband, for her, and for the payout they could collect. Exactly that. And she better say what she really meant. Because once he started, there would be no half measures, no mistakes. He had to know where he stood, no games. Her eyes closed. After a long moment, tears came. He slid an arm around her, patted her shoulder. Absurd, almost tender, considering what they were discussing. Like comforting a child who'd lost pocket change. "Please, Walter," she whispered. "Don't let me do this." They couldn't. It was insane. Yes, it was insane. They were going to do it anyway. She could feel it. He could too. She had no real reason. He treated her well enough. She didn't love him, but he'd never harmed her. Yet she was going to do it. Yes, God help her, she was. She quieted in his arms, breathing soft against him. Then, almost a whisper, he wasn't happy. He'd be better off dead. Yeah? That wasn't true, was it? Not from where he sat, Walter figured. She knew it wasn't true. She told herself over and over, but something inside her, something she couldn't name, loved death. Sometimes she pictured herself as death. Beautiful, sad, wrapped in scarlet, drifting through the night, hungry to gather the whole world into that darkness, away from pain, away from everything. The awful part was knowing how terrible it sounded, telling herself it was terrible. Yet to her, it didn't feel terrible. It felt like mercy. Like doing what was best for him if only he could see it. Did Walter understand? No. Nobody could. But they were going to do it. Yes. Straight down the line. Straight down the line. A night or two later, the conversation turned practical, almost ordinary. Like planning a weekend drive to the mountains. He needed to know what she'd already set in motion, whether she'd made any fatal missteps. Had she mentioned the policy to him at all? The accident coverage? Nothing. Not a word. Absolutely sure? Yes. All right. How had she planned to handle it? She'd meant to take out the policy first, without him knowing. He almost laughed at the disaster she'd nearly walked into. They'd crucify her in claims. The lack of the insured's knowledge was the first red flag they hunted. That route was dead. What else? A swimming pool? He was building one in the spring, out in the patio. And she thought it could look like he hit his head diving. An accident. Worse, he told her. Far worse. Why? People drowned that way, didn't they? Sure. But 5 or 6 years back, some insurance man fed the papers a story about most accidents happening in bathtubs. Ever since, any death in a tub, pool, or fish pond screamed suspicion when money was involved. 2 cases like that were open in California right now, neither clean, and if insurance had been in play, those people would already be facing the noose. Daytime job anyway. Hills had eyes. Once a pool went in, it became public property. Neighbors dropped by unannounced. Worst of all, you couldn't script it precisely. You waited for the moment, but the variables multiplied. No control to the last detail. He laid it out clear. 3 things made a murder work. The word slipped out murder, and he watched for her flinch. She didn't. She leaned closer instead. Firelight turning her eyes to something feral, alert. Go on, she said. I'm listening. First, help. One person couldn't pull it off unless they planned to confess and claim some emotional defense. It took more than one. Second, time, place, method, all locked in advance. Known to them, unknown to him. Third, audacity. Amateurs grasp the first two sometimes. The third only a professional understood. There always came a moment when nothing but sheer nerve carried you through. He couldn't explain why. It just did. The perfect murder? Not her pool idea. They'd smell it in seconds, prove it in 3, have a confession in 4. No, the perfect one was the gangster sent to the spot. First they fingered him, then they turned the girl he lived with. Around 6, she got a call, supposedly from a friend. She stepped out for lipstick, phone from the drugstore. Tonight they were catching a picture, she told him. Specific theater, around 9. There were the first 2 elements, help and the schedule nailed down. Now watch the third. They arrived in a car. Walter Huff let the gangster example hang between them. The theater lights and the hail of bullets vivid in his mind, like a scene he'd watched too many times from the wrong side of the screen. Boldness, he repeated. That was the only way. Shootings weren't accidents, sure, but the principle held. Audacity carried the day when everything else was locked down. Phyllis asked how then? He shifted to the money. The swimming pool had another flaw. No real payout. Accident policies paid double indemnity on railroad deaths. The companies knew the truth. Trains looked dangerous, but the stats said otherwise. They offered the rider cheap because claims stayed low. That was the hook they'd use, not some small-time payoff. $50,000, double on the right kind of accident. He'd spent years in the business. He hadn't wasted them. This was the beauty of it. Nerdlinger would know about the policy and never suspect a thing. He'd apply in writing, yet never truly apply. Pay with his own check, yet never pay. Board a train, yet never board it. She pressed. What was he talking about? He told her she'd see. First step, get the policy in place. He'd sell it to Nerdlinger himself, give the full pitch, same as any prospect. Witnesses required. Someone had to hear him push every angle. Auto covered solid, but nothing for personal injury. A man worth more than his car? He'd hammer that home until the man squirmed. Suppose Nerdlinger actually bought it. He wouldn't. Walter could reel him right to the edge and hold him there. He knew how to sell, but witnesses mattered, at least one. She'd arrange it. Better if she opposed the accident part, acted uneasy about it. She'd remember. Make the date soon, call to confirm, and remember the witness. Tomorrow? Subject to her call. She said she was excited. Terrible things stirring inside her. He felt it too. Kiss me, she said. He leaned in, the fire popping softly beside them. 15 years behind the wheel of that gambling game had done something to him. Insurance looked noble on the surface. Friend to widows, orphans, the broken. But it was the biggest roulette table alive. You bet your house won't burn, they bet it will. The house edge was carved in percentages, cold and exact. Most players never wanted the loss when they signed up, so they forgot the wager. The companies never forgot. A bet was a bet. When the day came, you wanted the house to burn, when the cash mattered more than the roof, that's when the spotters woke up. They knew every angle, every crook move beat them. You had to be better. He was the croupier. He knew the tricks because he dreamed them up at night, ready for the next player who tried. Then one night the thought flipped. Why not crook the wheel himself? All he needed was a plant to place the bet. Phyllis was the plant. To anyone else it might sound insane. Kill a man for a stack of chips. But from behind the table it looked different. He'd seen too many houses torched, cars mangled, blue holes in temples. The horrors people pulled to beat the odds had stopped feeling real long ago. Sit at a Monte Carlo table, watch the dealer's face as the ivory ball spins. Ask how much he'd care if you walked outside and ended it. His eyes might flick at the shot, not from pity, but to check no bet stayed on the felt for the estate to claim. That dealer wouldn't care, not a bit. The next evening he sat in the Nerdlinger living room, applications spread out, running the pitch smooth in practice. He highlighted the new bail bond feature. No extra cost. In a pinch, flash the card, get released on the spot for bailable offenses. The police took the card, the company bonded you. Convenient, especially since the Automobile Club offered something similar, and he knew Nerdlinger had been considering them. Nerdlinger said he'd pretty much dropped that idea. Then why not wrap this up now? Walter had covered everything. Might as well. Nerdlinger agreed. Sign here for the auto coverages. Collision, fire, theft, liability, and these 2 agent copies just for the files. Right on the dotted line. Nerdlinger was big, solid, about Walter's build. Glasses perched on his face. Walter played him straight, kept the tone professional, friendly. The moment the signatures dried, he pivoted to accident. Nerdlinger showed little interest. Walter pushed harder, laying out every benefit he knew, plus a couple he invented on the spot. Phyllis jumped in right on cue. The whole notion of accident coverage made her shiver. Walter didn't let up until he'd exhausted the list. Nerdlinger drummed his fingers on the chair arms, clearly wishing the salesman would leave. The real unease came from the witness Phyllis had chosen. He'd expected a family friend, maybe an older woman lingering after dinner. Instead, she brought in the stepdaughter, Lola. 19, pretty, reluctant. Phyllis insisted she stay to win wool for a sweater she was knitting. Walter had to keep tossing questions her way, tying her into the conversation so she'd recall the accident talk later. Every glance at her tightened something in his chest. Sitting there, knowing what was coming for her father, watching her win yarn in innocent loops, it was a complication he hadn't priced in. When he finally stood to leave, Nerdlinger mentioned he had to go out again, taking the car. Lola needed a ride to the boulevard for a picture show, or she'd have to bus it. The offer came out of Walter before he could stop it. She grabbed her hat and coat. Moments later, they were rolling down the hill in his car. Mr. Huff? Yes? She wasn't going to a picture show. No? She was meeting someone. At the drugstore. Oh. Walter Huff felt the wheel smooth under his hands as Lola's voice cut through the quiet of the car, bright and a little breathless. Would he haul them both down? She asked. Sure, he said, no trouble at all. She checked again. Really wouldn't mind. He assured her it was fine, and he wouldn't tell anyone at home. There were reasons. He promised he wouldn't breathe a word. They pulled up to the drugstore. She hopped out, returned moments later with a young man in tow, dark Italian features, good-looking in a sharp way. The same guy who'd been lingering outside. Lola introduced him as Mr. Sacchetti. Walter nodded, hello, told him to climb in. They slid into the back seat together, exchanging quick private grins that made the air in the car feel suddenly smaller. He drove them down Beechwood toward the boulevard. Where to? Anywhere, they said. Hollywood and Vine would be swell. He eased to the curb there. Lola stepped out first, then reached back to the open window, took his hand in both of hers, eyes sparkling under the streetlights. It had been darling of him to drive them, she said. Lean close. She'd tell him a secret. If he hadn't, they'd have had to walk. How would they get back? Walk again? Did she need money? No. Her father would kill her if he found out she'd already blown her week's allowance. Thanks anyway. And remember, don't tell. Hurry, she added, or you'll miss your light. He watched them disappear into the evening crowd, then pointed the car toward home. Phyllis arrived about 30 minutes later, humming some tune from a Nelson Eddy picture, light and pleased with herself. "Did he like her sweater?" she asked right away. "Yeah, sure. Lovely color, wasn't it? Old rose. She'd never worn it before, but it suited her. It would look all right," he agreed. Where had he left Lola? On the boulevard. Where exactly? He hadn't noticed. Anyone waiting for her? Not that he'd seen. Why? Just wondering, Phyllis said. Lola had been seeing a boy named Sacchetti. Perfectly terrible person. Forbidden to see him. He wasn't around tonight, Walter told her. At least he hadn't noticed. Why hadn't she warned him about the girl? Phyllis shrugged. He'd said to have a witness. Yeah, but not her. A man's own daughter, and using her for this. Phyllis's face changed then, the softness hardening into something brittle and cold. What was the matter? Was he getting ready to back out? No, but she could have picked anyone else. Him driving the girl down the boulevard, the applications right there in his pocket the whole time, he pulled them out to show her. One of the agent's copies was the updated accident application. $25,000, double indemnity all the way for death or disability on a railroad train. The plan required a few more visits to Nerdlinger's office. First time, he handed over the bail bond guarantee card, lingered 5 minutes, told the man to keep it in the car, and left. Second visit, a small leather memo book with Nerdlinger's name stamped in gilt. Standard promotion for policyholders. Third time, he delivered the automobile policies and collected the check. $79.52. Back at the office that afternoon, Nettie said someone was waiting in his private office. A Miss Lola Nerdlinger and a Mr. Sacchetti. She hadn't caught the first name. He walked in. Lola laughed when she saw him, the same easy warmth he'd noticed before. Surprised to see them again? Not much, he said. What could he do for them? They'd come for a favor, she explained. His own fault, really. What he told her father the other night about getting money on a car if needed. Nino wanted to take him up on it. Walter felt the familiar squeeze. The Automobile Club's loan program had been eating into his business. He'd set up a small finance company of his own, served as a director, spent 1 day a week there just to counter that question. He'd mentioned it casually to Nerdlinger during the sales talk, never dreaming the daughter was listening. He looked at Sacchetti. Wanted to borrow on his car? Yes, sir. What make? Sacchetti told him. A cheap model. Sedan? Coupe. In his name? Paid for? Yes, sir. Lola giggled at the look that must have crossed Walter's face. Nino couldn't use it the other night. No gas. Walter lit a cigarette, bought himself a moment. He didn't want any part of this, didn't want to touch Sacchetti's loan, or the girl, or anything connected to them. He asked if they were sure. If Sacchetti wasn't working and couldn't see a clear way to repay, it was a fast road to losing the car. The whole second-hand market ran on people who thought they could handle a small loan and found out they couldn't. Lola turned serious. It was different for Nino. He wasn't working, but this wasn't for pocket money. He'd finished all the coursework for his CD at USC Chemistry. One good position already promised if he could just get the degree. To finish, he needed the dissertation published fees for the diploma, this and that. He wouldn't waste the money on living. Friends would cover that. Walter knew he had to come through. The sight of her sitting there, so earnest, made his nerves crawl. All he wanted was to agree and get them gone. How much? Nino thought $250 would do it. Walter ran the numbers in his head. Charges would push it near $285. Steep for that car. He'd need a day or two to see if they could manage it. They left. Lola ducked back in the doorway a second later, He was awfully nice to her. She didn't know why she kept bothering him. "That's all right," he said, "glad to help." She told him he could call her Lola. "Thanks. He'd be glad any time." This was secret, too. Yes, he knew. She was terribly grateful, Mr. Huff. "Thanks, Lola." The accident policy cleared a couple days later. He needed Nerdlinger's check for the exact premium right away. The dates had to line up. The policy itself would never reach Nerdlinger. Phyllis would handle that, slip it into his safe deposit box later for discovery. He'd never mention it to the man. But the canceled check would prove payment from Nerdlinger himself, matching the application in the files, matching the office visits if anyone ever pressed him. He walked into Nerdlinger's office looking worried, closed the door on the secretary, got straight to it. He was in a hole, he said. Wondered if Nerdlinger would help him out. Nerdlinger hesitated. Wary. "What was it?" "Pretty bad." "Tell him." Walter had overcharged on the automobile insurance. Nerdlinger laughed, relieved. "That was all?" He thought it was a touch for money. "No, nothing like that. Worse, from Walter's side." "Did he get a refund?" "Sure." "Then better from Nerdlinger's side." "Not that simple. There was a board in the business, formed to stop rate cutting, make sure every company charged enough to protect policyholders. Walter was in trouble with them. They'd recently ruled that every alleged agent mischarge got investigated. They'd haul him in for hearings, pester Nerdlinger until he couldn't stand it, all because Walter had looked up the wrong rate that night at the house and only caught it this morning when he balanced his accounts. What did Walter need? One fix. Nerdlinger's original check for $79.52 had been deposited. Nothing to do there. But if Nerdlinger would take cash for it right now, Walter had it with him, and write a new check for the correct amount, $58.60, it would square everything. No investigation. How did that balance? Multiple card bookkeeping. Complicated. Even Walter didn't fully grasp it. But the cashier said that's how the entries worked. Walter Huff watched Nerdlinger stare out the window, a strange glint flickering in the man's eyes. Half amusement, half something sharper. "All right," Nerdlinger said at last. He didn't see why not. Walter handed over the cash, pocketed the new check, and felt the tension uncoil just enough. The whole story about the board and multiple card bookkeeping was pure invention. No such rule existed for agent errors. No cashier had ever mentioned it, but $20 extra in a man's pocket usually silenced questions. He drove straight to the bank, deposited the check, and pictured the stub entry. Simple. Insurance. Exactly what he needed on record. The next day, Lola and Sacchetti returned for the loan. When he passed them, the check, Lola spun in a quick, delighted circle right there on the office floor. "Would he like a copy of Nino's dissertation?" she asked. "He said he'd love it." The title rolled off her tongue. The Problem of Colloids and the Reduction of Low-Grade Gold Ores. He promised to look forward to it. Liar, she teased. He wouldn't even read it. He'd try to understand what he could, he answered. She'd make sure he got a signed copy anyway. "Thanks." "Goodbye," she said. Maybe they were rid of him for a while. "Maybe," he echoed. All of it unfolded in late winter, mid-February by the calendar. Though in California, the days stayed mild and green as ever. From then on, through the long spring, sleep became a stranger. Night after night, he jolted awake, convinced they'd missed some fatal detail, that the trap had already snapped shut around him. The train itself was the hardest knot. How to maneuver a man who hated railroads, who traveled everywhere by car onto one single ride. Plenty of Californians never set foot in a coach. Nerdlinger was one of them. The problem gnawed at him for weeks. One worry eased unexpectedly. That odd look on Nerdlinger's face when he took the cash. It had haunted Walter. The fear that the secretary knew something, that a casual remark later would unravel everything. Phyllis dug out the truth. Nerdlinger expensed the car insurance to his company. The secretary had already booked the original amount. If he kept quiet about the refund, he pocketed the difference, and the canceled check stayed as proof of payment. He told no one, not Lola, not the secretary, but he couldn't resist bragging to his wife how clever he'd been. It broke perfectly in their favor. Walter feared his own cracks would show. If sales slipped, the office would notice, and later that dip would look suspicious. So he threw himself into the work harder than ever. Every lead, every marginal prospect pressured until they signed. Shameful tactic some days, but the numbers climbed. 12% up in March, another 2 in April, 7 more in May when car activity peaked. He even landed a syndicate deal for the finance company with second-hand dealers. The book stayed clean. He was the golden boy in both offices that spring. Everyone tipped their hats. Then Phyllis called with the news he'd been waiting for. Nerdlinger was going to his class reunion. Palo Alto. June, 6 weeks away. That was it, Walter said. Exactly what they needed. But he wanted to drive. Take the car, have her come along. He'd make a fuss if she refused. Walter cut through her complaint. No man preferred his wife on a trip like that, reunion or not. Polite offer, nothing more. She should act uninterested, drag her feet about the reunion. He dropped the car idea fast enough. She'd be surprised how easy. She tried for a full week. No change. He insisted on the car. Picnics, side trips, too much hassle without it. Besides, he hated trains. Got sick on them. Could she play up an act? She already had full performance as far as she dared. Lola barely spoke to her now. Thought she was being selfish. She could try again, but... No, Walter said. Nothing more. Alternative. The day before departure, damage the car, mess the ignition, force it into the shop. Train becomes the only option. Out of the question. If she'd already acted reluctant, sabotage would scream suspicion. Lola especially would never buy it later. And they needed the car. Both cars, hers and his, essential. Whatever happened, the car stayed perfect, running smooth. She still didn't know the plan. She would. In time. But the cars were non-negotiable. Maybe abandon the train idea altogether? No. Train or nothing. He wasn't interested in small-time jobs. This was for the limit, 50,000 double indemnity, or it wasn't worth the risk. That was all he cared about. She backed off. Just wondering, she said. Quit wondering. 2 or 3 days later, the phone rang at the office around 4. Walter? Phyllis's voice tight. Was he alone? Important. Something had happened. He told her to call the bungalow in half an hour. No chances on the company line. He drove home fast. The phone rang minutes after he walked in. The Palo Alto trip was off. Nerdlinger had broken his leg. What? She didn't know details yet. Holding a neighbor's dog, chasing a rabbit, slipped and fell. Hospital now. Lola with him, bringing him home soon. That killed it, Walter said. All of it. I'm afraid so, she answered. He sat through dinner without tasting a bite. Then it hit him. Not a disaster, maybe the perfect break. He paced the living room for 3 miles worth of circles, nerves electric, waiting for the bell. When it rang, he opened the door to find her breathless coat thrown on. Only a few minutes, she said. Supposed to be buying him magazines on the boulevard. She could cry. Whoever heard of such a stupid thing? Never mind that, Walter cut in. What kind of break? Bad? Down near the ankle? Not bad. In pulleys? No. Weight on it comes off in a week. But he won't walk. Long cast. Long time. Walter Huff felt the certainty settle in his chest like a weight finally dropping into place. He could walk, he told her, if she got him up. On crutches, with the foot in a cast, he wouldn't be able to drive. Train became the only option. This was the break they'd been waiting for, the piece that made the whole plan snap together. Identification would be effortless. Crutches, cast, the unmistakable silhouette of a man hobbling along, get him out of that bed, convince him the trip was still worth it, a vacation after all the pain, and they were home free. He could feel it deep in his gut. They were in. Phyllis hesitated. Dangerous, she said. Getting a broken leg case moving too soon. She'd been a nurse once. She knew, almost guaranteed to shorten the leg permanently, one shorter than the other. He let the silence stretch just long enough for her to catch the irony. Whether one leg ended up shorter than the other wasn't exactly a problem he'd have to live with. Decoration Day brought no mail, but the day watchman collected from the general fidelity box anyway. A thick envelope waited for Walter, marked personal. Inside lay a booklet. Colloids in gold mining, an examination of methods in dealing with the problem. Inscribed on the flyleaf, to Mr. Walter Huff, in appreciation of past favors, Beniamino Sacchetti. He slipped it into his desk drawer, the small gesture landing like quiet confirmation. The train left at 9:45 that night. Around 4, Walter drove to San Pedro Street, pitched employer's liability to the wine company manager. No sale possible until August when the grapes rolled in, but the visit served its purpose. The man explained why he couldn't commit yet. Walter acted disappointed, lingered just long enough, then returned to the office. He told Nettie he thought he had a live one. Make out a prospect card. The card stamped the date of first contact automatically. He signed a few letters, left at 5:30. Home by 6, the Filipino houseboy had dinner ready. Walter had arranged that. June 3rd, he should have paid wages on the 1st but claimed he'd forgotten the bank. Today, he'd stop by at lunch, settled up. The boy was itching to spend it. Walter gave the go-ahead. Soup hit the table before he even washed his hands. Steak, mashed potatoes, peas and carrots, fruit cup for dessert. Nerves made every bite a chore, but he forced it down. Coffee barely finished, and the boy had the dishes done, already changed into cream pants, white shoes and socks, brown coat, open-necked white shirt, ready for his night out. Hollywood styles trickled down fast. These days, the houseboy dressed sharper than the stars. He left around 6:45. When he checked one last time, Walter was stripping down for bed. "Gonna lie there and work," he said. Grab paper, pencils, scribble notes on public liability for the afternoon prospect. Dates noted deliberately. The kind of scraps you'd file later. He dialed the office. Joe Pete, the night watchman, picked up. Walter asked a favor. Go to his desk, grab the rate book, loose leaf, soft leather, name in gold, rates underneath. Forgotten it, needed it now. Send by messenger, quick. 15 minutes later, Joe Pete called back. No book on the desk, nowhere in the office. Nettie must have locked it away. Want him to ask her tomorrow? No, not that urgent. He'd manage. The rate book sat hidden where no one would look. But the call placed him at home, working late. Others would call too. No need to plant the date deeper. Joe Pete logged every action by time and date anyway. Walter glanced at his watch. 7:38? At 7:45, the phone rang again. Phyllis. The blue. Blue it is. Code for the suit. They'd guessed blue, but confirmation mattered. She ducked to the drugstore for an extra toothbrush. untraceable dial call. Walter hung up, dressed in his own blue suit. First, he bandaged his foot. Thick gauze, then adhesive tape wrapped to mimic a cast around the ankle. Looked convincing, cuttable in seconds when the time came. Shoe laced tight over it. Barely. Horn-rimmed glasses like Nerdlinger's went in his pocket. 58 inches of light cotton rope, coiled small. A heavy iron rod handle, the kind stores use for packages but sturdier. Coat bulged. He ignored it. 8:20, he called Nettie. Had she seen the rape book before he left? No, Mr. Huff. Lost it, maybe. Joe Pete couldn't find it either. She offered to run in and look. No, not worth it. Toll call from Burbank. Record would show 8:40 from the house. He hung up, opened the bell box, wedged half a visiting card against the clapper. Same for the kitchen doorbell. An hour and a half away, if either rang, the card would drop. He'd claim he was in the bath, door shut, water running. Didn't hear. But he'd know someone tried. Card set, he drove to Hollywoodland, parked on the main street, short walk to the house, close enough to move fast, far enough the car wouldn't draw eyes. Not easy with the bandaged foot. Behind a big tree around the bend, no houses in view. He waited. 2 minutes felt like 60. Then headlights swept the curve. Phyllis at the wheel, Nerdlinger beside her, crutches tucked under his elbow against the door. The car stopped right at the tree, exactly as rehearsed. The tricky part came next. Get him out for a minute. Bags in back, everything positioned so Walter could slide in. A healthy man would have been simple. A cripple settled in the passenger seat, especially with someone right beside him, was like prying a hippo loose. She opened her lines just as he drilled her, 40 times at least. I haven't got my pocketbook. Didn't you take it? I thought so. Look, on the back seat. No, nothing back there but my stuff. I can't think what I've done with it. Well, come on. We'll be late. Here's $1. That'll be enough till you get back. I must have left it on the sofa, in the living room. Well, all right. You left it on the sofa in the living room. Now get going. She was reaching the part they'd practiced most. Walter Huff crouched low in the back seat, heart hammering against his ribs, every creak of the spring sounding like a shout in the dark. The front door had barely closed behind him when Phyllis's voice floated back, soft and steady. Had she done it right? So far, he whispered. How had she gotten rid of Lola? No need. She'd had a UCLA invitation. Phyllis drove her to the bus at 7. Good. Back up now, shorten his walk, smooth him down. She eased the car reverse, tires whispering on the pavement. Nerdlinger climbed in again, crutches clattering, and she pulled away. Walter stayed curled tight, breath shallow, ears straining. Listening to a husband and wife talk when they thought no one heard felt like peering through a keyhole at something raw and ordinary. Phyllis coaxed him calm, and soon he was grumbling about Belle the maid, how she'd pass dishes at dinner like she didn't care. Phyllis fired back about the broken plates, the endless replacements. Then the talk drifted to Hobey and Ethel, some couple they knew. Hobey was finished, Nerdlinger declared. Hobey could damn well know it. Phyllis agreed she'd liked Ethel once, but the woman's recent hi-hat attitude was unbearable. They tallied dinners owed, figured they were one behind, and decided to settle that last obligation, then cut ties for good. After Palo Alto, he'd take taxis everywhere. He said crutches would ruin the fun, might strain the leg worse. Phyllis played along perfectly, as if the trip were real, as if her mind held nothing darker than mild concern. Women could switch masks like that, smooth, convincing, terrifying in their ease. Walter couldn't see the road, couldn't risk shifting. He barely breathed. She drove steady. No sudden brakes, no traffic snarls, nothing to make Nerdlinger glance back. The man lit a cigar, settled deep in the seat, smoke curling lazy. After a stretch of silence, she rapped the horn twice. Sharp, deliberate, their signal. The dark side street they'd chosen, half a mile from the station. Walter rose fast. One hand clamped over Nerdlinger's mouth, the other yanked his head back hard. The man's fingers locked around Walter's wrist, frantic. The cigar still glowed between them. Walter plucked it free, passed it forward. Phyllis took it without a word. He seized a crutch, hooked the crosspiece under Nerdlinger's chin, and pulled, sharp, merciless. 2 seconds. The neck gave with a dull snap. Nerdlinger slumped, curled on the seat, unmarked except for a thin crease across the bridge of his nose from the crutch bar. The moment of pure audacity had arrived. The hinge every murder turned on. What came next wasn't danger in the now. It was the slow, invisible stitching of how it would look tomorrow, the day after, forever. Phyllis started to flick the cigar away. Walter stopped her. That cigar had been lit in the house. It had to stay with the body. She held it steady while he worked the rope. He looped it across the shoulders, just below the neck, under the arms, across the back. Tight knots, then the iron handle hooked both strands, cinching them like a harness. A corpse was dead weight, awkward, heavy. This rig would let them move him fast. "We're there," she said. "Park now or circle the block?" "Park." "Ready?" She eased to the curb on the quiet side street, 1 block from the station. Parking had stumped them earlier. The main lot meant redcaps swarming the doors. Disaster. Here they could breathe. If someone noticed later, they'd stage a quick spat in front of witnesses. Him griping about the long walk she'd forced. She stepped out with the bag and briefcase. Walter cranked the windows shut, gathered the crutches, and slid from the back. She locked the car. Nerdlinger stayed curled on the seat, harnessed, waiting. Phyllis walked ahead, bags in hand. Walter followed on the crutches, bad leg half raised in a convincing hobble. The pose helped. A woman escorting a cripple looked natural. It also kept redcaps from staring too close at his face. Around the corner, the station lights flared. A redcap came running, took the bags from her without slowing for Walter, and hustled off. 9:45 for San Francisco, Section 8. Car C, she told him. 8 and C, yes ma'am. Meet you on the train. They entered the station. Walter signaled her to drop back. Close enough to mutter if trouble came. Glasses on, hat low but not suspiciously so. Eyes down, watching crutch placement. Cigar clamped in his teeth, half to mask his features, half to twist his expression against the smoke. The train waited on a siding behind the station. He counted cars quick. 3rd one. Both conductors stood there, plus the porter, plus the redcap waiting for his tip. 4 pairs of eyes, too many. If they all got a clear look, it could end them. Phyllis hurried ahead, tipped the redcap generously. He bowed off toward the parking lot, never passing close. The porter spotted Walter, started forward. She caught his arm. "He doesn't help," she said. The porter paused, confused. The Pullman conductor got it first. "Hey!" The porter froze. They all turned away, talking among themselves. Walter stumped up the steps, reached the top, her cue. "Dear." He half turned. "Come back to the observation platform. I'll say goodbye there, then I won't have to worry about getting off later. You've still got a few minutes. We can talk." "Fine." He started through the car. She walked alongside, outside. 3 cars full of passengers settling in. Berths made, bags in aisles. Porters were outside at their stations. Walter kept his gaze low, cigar clenched, face contorted against imaginary smoke. No one really saw him, yet everyone did. Crutches triggered instant courtesy. Bag snatched aside, aisles cleared. He nodded, mumbled thanks through the smoke. On the observation platform, her face told him trouble. A man sat tucked in shadow, smoking quietly. Walter took the opposite bench. She reached across. He took her hand. Her eyes searched for direction. He shaped the word with his lips over and over. Parking! 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 After a beat, she understood. Dear. Yes? You're not mad anymore? About where I parked? Forget it. I thought I was headed for the station lot, honestly. I get turned around in this part of town. I never meant to make you walk so far. I told you, forget it. I'm terribly sorry. Kiss me. He lifted his watch into the light. 7 minutes to departure. She needed 6 to clear for what came next. Listen, Phyllis. No sense waiting around. Why don't you go? You don't mind? Not a bit. No point dragging it out. Goodbye, then. Goodbye. Have a good time. 3 cheers for Leland Stanford. I'll do my best. Kiss me again. Goodbye. The man stayed put. Walter hadn't counted on company. Departures usually left platforms empty. He racked his brain for an exit. The stranger finished his cigarette, flicked it over the rail, and started talking. Women are funny. Funny, and then some. Couldn't help overhearing your chat with your wife. About the parking reminds me of something my wife pulled coming back from San Diego. He launched into the story. Walter studied what he could in the dark. Face hidden, probably mutual. The man paused. Walter had to respond. Yeah, women are funny, all right, especially behind the wheel. They're all of that. The train lurched into motion, crawling through Los Angeles outskirts. The stranger kept talking. Then an idea surfaced. Walter patted his pockets, feigning search. You lose something? Walter Huff crouched low behind the bench. The stranger's voice droning on about his wife and the San Diego drive. Every word scraping against the nerves already raw from the night's work. The train picked up speed, the rhythm of the rails steady under them. Walter patted his pockets again, slower this time, letting the motion draw the man in. My ticket, he said, voice pitched just right, frustrated, a little helpless. I can't find it. The stranger chuckled. Say, maybe I've got mine. Yeah, here it is. Walter kept the act going. You know what I bet she did? Put that ticket in my briefcase, right where I told her not to. She was supposed to stick it in the pocket of this suit, and now... Oh, it'll turn up, the man said. Don't that beat all? Here I've got to hobble through those cars just because... Don't be silly. Stay where you are. No, I couldn't let you. Be a pleasure, old man. Stay right there and I'll get it for you. What's your space? Would you? Section 8, Car C. I'll be right back with it. The train was rolling faster now. Walter watched for the dairy sign, a white shape looming in the dark about a quarter-mile ahead. He lit the cigar again, the flame steady in cupped hands. Crutches tucked under one arm. He swung his leg over the rail and lowered himself. One crutch caught on the ties, spun him hard. He nearly lost his grip. He hung on until the sign slid square alongside, then dropped. The darkness swallowed him instantly. Nothing blacker than a railroad track at night. The train roared past, wheels thundering, and he crouched between the rails, feet tingling from the impact. He dropped to the left side, into the narrow footpath, safe from any highway glance 200 feet away. He stayed low, hands and knees in the gravel, eyes straining across the tracks toward the dirt road that fed a couple of small factories farther back. Vacant lots all around, no lights. She should be there. 7-minute head start for her, 6 minutes for the train to reach this point, 11-minute drive from the station. He timed it 20 times. He stared, willing the car to appear. Nothing. Time stretched thin. Panic crept in. Maybe she'd clipped a fender. Maybe a cop had pulled her over. His insides turned liquid. Then he heard it. Panting, ragged breaths. Footsteps. Quick bursts, then stops. Something heavy, uneven, coming closer. A nightmare shape resolved in the gloom. Phyllis, staggering under Nerdlinger's 200-pound frame, the harness handle gripped tight, his head lolling beside hers like a broken doll's. They looked like a scene ripped from a horror reel. Walter bolted across, grabbed the legs, took half the weight. They lurched a few steps. She started to drop him. Not that track. The other one. They hauled him over to the outbound rails, let him fall. Walter sliced the harness free, pocketed it. He placed the glowing cigar a foot or two from the body, tossed one crutch across the torso, the other beside the track. Where's the car? There. Couldn't you see it? He looked. There it sat, right on the dirt road, headlights off. We're done. Let's go. They ran, climbed in. She fired the engine, slammed into gear. Oh my, his hat! Walter snatched it, sailed it out the window onto the tracks. It's okay. A hat can roll. Get going. She floored it. They passed the factories, hit a street. On Sunset, she blew through a light. Watch that stuff, can't you, Phyllis? If you're stopped now with me in the car, we're sunk. Can I drive with that thing going on? She meant the radio. He'd switched it on, part of the alibi, proof he'd knocked off work and listened at home. He needed the night's programming, more detail than newspapers gave. I've got to have it. You know that? Let me alone. Let me drive. She hit a zone, speed climbing to 70. Walter clenched his jaw, stayed silent. In a vacant lot, he tossed the rope. A mile later, the handle went out. Passing a curb drain, he dropped the glasses in. Then he noticed her shoes, scarred, scuffed from the ballast. What did you carry him for? Why didn't you let me? Where were you? Where were you? I was there. I was waiting. Did I know that? Could I just sit there with that in the car? I was trying to see where you were. I couldn't see. Let me alone. Let me drive. Your shoes. He choked it back. In seconds, she started again, raving, wild, incoherent about him, about Walter, about anything that surfaced. He snapped back, snarling. After everything they'd done, they were tearing at each other like animals, neither able to stop. The dope of the night still coursed through them. Phyllis, cut this out. We've got to talk. It may be our last chance. Talk then. Who's stopping you? First, you don't know anything about this insurance policy. How many times do you have to say that? I'm only telling you. You've told me till I'm sick of hearing it. Next, the inquest. I bring a minister. I know that. I bring a minister to take charge of the body. How many times do I have to listen? Are you going to let me drive? Okay, then. Drive. Is Belle home? How do I know? No. And Lola's out? Didn't I tell you? Then you'll have to stop at the drugstore. Get a pint of ice cream or something. Witnesses you drove straight home from the station. Say something to fix the time, the date. Get out! Get out! I'll go insane. I can't get out. I've got to get to my car. Do you know what that means if I take time to walk? I can't complete my alibi. I said, get out. Drive on, or I'll sock you. She pulled up beside his car. No kiss, no goodbye. He climbed out into his own vehicle, started the engine, and drove home. The clock read 10:25 when he walked in. He opened the telephone bell box. The card still leaned against the clapper. He closed it, pocketed the card. In the kitchen, the doorbell card waited untouched. Into his pocket. Upstairs, he stripped, pulled on pajamas and slippers, cut the bandage from his foot. Downstairs again, he shoved bandage, cards, and newspaper into the fireplace and lit it. Watched the flames eat everything clean. He went to the telephone, started to dial. One last callback needed to seal the late alibi. A drawstring tightened in his throat. A sob broke free. He slammed the receiver down. It was hitting him now, hard. He swallowed, tried to steady his voice. A foolish notion surfaced. Sing something. Shake it loose. He started Isle of Capri. 2 notes in, it collapsed into a wail. He walked to the dining room, poured a drink. Another, mumbled to himself, hunting for control. Needed words to anchor him. The Lord's Prayer came to mind. He tried it twice, low and halting. On the 3rd attempt, he couldn't remember how it ended. Walter Huff steadied his hand enough to dial again at 10:48. Ike Schwartz picked up on the second ring. Another salesman at General Fidelity. Reliable, quick with numbers. Walter forced his voice calm, asked a favor. He was sweating a public liability bond proposition for that wine company. Needed it ready for tomorrow morning, but he'd left his rate book behind. Joe Pete couldn't find it. Could Ike check his own copy? He had it handy? Sure, Ike said. Glad to help. Walter recited the details, limits, classifications, the works. Ike promised 15 minutes and hung up. He paced the living room, nails digging crescents into his palms, fighting to keep the shakes down. The drawstring in his throat tugged again, threatening to choke him. He mumbled the same lines he'd just fed Ike, over and over, like a prayer to hold himself together. The phone rang. Ike had the figures. 3 different breakdowns, thorough as always. 20 minutes of careful dictation. Walter scribbled, sweat beading on his forehead, dripping off the tip of his nose. When it ended, he thanked Ike 1,000 times, voice steady enough to pass. The instant the line went dead, everything gave way. He bolted for the bathroom and was violently sick. Sicker than he'd ever been, body heaving until there was nothing left. After, he collapsed in the bed. The light stayed on a long time. He couldn't bring himself to reach for the switch. He lay staring into the black chills rippling through him now and then, limbs trembling uncontrollably. Then the tremors eased and he drifted into a dull stupor. Thoughts crept in anyway. Slow, inevitable. He had killed a man, killed him to possess a woman, placed himself entirely in her power. One finger pointed his way and he'd hang. All that for her, and now the thought of seeing her again turned his stomach. One drop of fear, that was all it took. Love curdled into hate. Morning came. He forced down orange juice and coffee, carried the paper upstairs to read alone, away from the Filipino's eyes. Front page, bold type. Oil man, on way to June rally, dies in train fall. H.S. Nerdlinger, petroleum pioneer, killed in plunge from express en route to reunion at Leland, Stanford. The article detailed the discovery. Body on the tracks 2 miles north of the city, shortly before midnight. Injuries to head and neck. Departed earlier on the northbound train for his Stanford reunion. Fractured leg weeks prior. Police suspected unfamiliarity with crutches caused him to lose balance on the observation platform, where he was last seen alive. 44 years old. Fresno native, Stanford graduate, oil industry trailblazer, Long Beach Signal Hill. Last 3 years heading the local Western Pipe and Supply office. Survived by widow Phyllis Belden, Neerdlinger, formerly head nurse at Verdugo Health Institute, and daughter Lola. 20 to 9, Nettie called. Mr. Norton wanted him in as soon as possible. Walter said he knew why and was on his way. No need to feign surprise. They already had the story. The day dragged through fog. Norton, short, stocky, 35 forever, trying to fill his father's shoes, sat behind a big desk, grave and businesslike. Keyes loomed in the background, fat, peevish, the old regime holdover who never let young Norton forget a mistake. Walter feared Keyes most. The best claim man on the coast. A theorist who could smell fraud through a closed door. First Norton. Walter laid it out plain. He'd pitched Neerdlinger the accident policy. Wife and daughter shot it down hard. Dropped it that night, tried again at the office a couple days later. That would square with the secretary's memory. Neerdlinger bought then only after Walter promised to keep it from the family. Took the application, delivered the policy later, collected the check. They moved to Keyes' office and ran through it again. All morning. Phones rang, telegrams arrived, San Francisco investigators interviewing train passengers, police updates, secretary statements. Lola on the line when they reached her. They tried Phyllis. Walter had drilled her not to answer, so she didn't. Coroner arranged for autopsy, quiet hookup between companies and medical examiners. No need for court order that would flag the insurance angle. Mid-afternoon, the report came. Death by broken neck. Inquest postponed 2 days. By 4, Keyes' desk was buried under memos and wires. He weighted them down, mopped sweat, snapped at everyone. Norton grew brighter with each new piece. A San Francisco call came in. Jackson, the man from the observation platform. Norton listened, nodded, hung up, added the memo to the pile. Clear case of suicide. Suicide voided the policy. Accident coverage only. Yeah? Keyes grunted. Norton walked him through it. First, policy taken in absolute secrecy. No word to wife, daughter, secretary, anyone. If Huff had been sharper... Known what? No need to get sore, Huff. But it looked funny. Didn't look funny at all, Walter said. Happens every day. If they had tried to insure him without his knowledge, that would look funny. That's right. Leave Huff out of it. All I'm saying, Huff's record shows he'd have flagged anything off. Better check your own agents. All right, skip it. Secrecy because the family would guess his intent. They knew what was in his head. Dig into his books, his history, trouble would surface. Next, fractured leg, no claim filed. Why? He planned this. Afraid a claim would alert the family to the policy, they'd block him. How? They'd call us, we'd cancel, refund unused premium fast, doctor visit to check the leg. Would tip everything. Big point. Go on. Walter Huff sat in Norton's office as the light slanted lower through the blinds, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the faint metallic tang of Keyes' ashtray. Norton leaned back in his chair, trying to project calm certainty, the kind his father used to wear like a second skin. Keyes slouched opposite, still mopping his forehead, his bulk making the leather creak every time he shifted. Walter kept his face neutral, hands folded in his lap, feeling the pulse in his wrist like a distant drum. Norton spoke first, voice measured. They were no worse off, he said. The inquest hadn't hurt them. Keyes exhaled smoke in a slow, disgusted stream. No better off either. At least they hadn't done anything foolish, Norton added. Keyes stubbed his cigarette hard. What now? Walter listened to the silent stretch, the two men staring each other down across the desk. Norton wanted safety, the conservative play, the ancient strategy of waiting, letting the other side carry the burden of proof. Suicide remained possible. They could lean on that at the right moment, force her to disprove it. No need to rush in and expose the company to a civil suit, maybe worse. Keyes wanted the opposite. Strike fast, file the complaint tonight if they could, demand her arrest, hold her 48-hour incommunicado, separate her from any accomplice, sweat her until something cracked. Surprise was the only weapon left against a perfect job. Practice said, wait. Instinct screamed, move. Norton held firm. His father would have taken a chance, Keyes muttered. Old man Norton could gamble. Norton cut him off sharp. He wasn't his father. The room settled into uneasy quiet again. Keyes lit another cigarette, the match flare briefly illuminating the deep lines around his eyes. Norton drummed his fingers once, twice, then reached for the phone to call the investigators for any late detail from the inquest. Walter stayed silent, letting the argument wash over him, every word tightening the knot in his stomach. They still had no hard evidence, only Keyes' hunch, and those actuarial tables that ruled out suicide in a way no one could argue. The minister's presence at the inquest had done its job, steered the jury clear of anything conclusive. Manner unknown. Safe, vague, useless to the company. Keyes finally spoke again, voice low and flat. They'd wait, for now. But he wasn't dropping it. He'd keep digging, keep the investigators on every angle, the train passengers, the station staff, the family history, anything that might surface a slip. Norton nodded, relieved to stay on familiar ground. Walter excused himself when the conversation circled back to routine claims procedure, promising to update the file if anything new came through his desk. He walked out into the corridor, feeling the weight of Keyes' gaze on his back, even though the man hadn't looked up. The elevator ride down was silent except for the soft hum of cables. Outside, the late afternoon sun hit like a slap. Walter drove home slowly, windows down, letting the wind dry the cold sweat that kept breaking across his skin. The radio played low, some orchestra number he barely heard. Every few blocks he checked the rearview mirror, half expecting a tail, half knowing there wasn't one yet. Keyes didn't need proof to suspect. He just needed time. At the bungalow he parked, sat a minute with the engine off, listening to the tick of metal cooling. Inside, the Filipino had left for the day. Walter poured a drink, stood at the window staring at nothing. The plan had worked. Clean, audacious, complete. Yet the victory tasted like ash. Phyllis was out there, free for now, but Keyes' words echoed. The beneficiary was automatically under suspicion. One thread pulled, and the whole thing could unravel. Walter set the glass down untouched. He didn't want to see her, didn't want to hear her voice. Fear had done its work. Love hadn't just curdled, it had turned to poison. He went upstairs, lay on the bed without undressing, and stared at the ceiling until the room darkened. Tomorrow the company would keep moving, cautious, waiting. Keyes would keep digging, and Walter would keep selling policies, smiling at prospects, pretending the ground under him wasn't shifting every second. Keyes absorbed Norton's careful strategy as the words landed between them. He would follow routine to the letter. Wait her out, deny liability on the grounds that the accident itself had never been proven, and compel her to bring suit before they showed their hand. Keyes felt the weight of defeat settle in his chest at once, yet he voiced the blunt truth that the company was already finished. Norton conceded the danger, but held firm. When Keyes demanded to know why he spoke with such certainty, Norton recounted his talks with the police. He had flagged murder. They had once agreed, but after exhaustive review, they had dropped the idea. Their files showed no record of murder or even an attempt, by pushing a man off the rear of a slow-moving train. How could any killer guarantee death? A mere injury would collapse the whole scheme. No, they assured him this was legitimate, nothing more than a freak accident. Keyes pushed harder, asking if they had traced every soul on that train for any link to the wife, insisting someone else had been aboard. Norton countered that they had done better than that. They had questioned the observation car steward, who had taken a seat right by the door to mark his slips at the start of the trip, and swore no one had joined Neerdlinger outside. Anyone passing would have forced him to move. The steward remembered Jackson, stepping out about 10 minutes before departure, the cripple passing by. Jackson returning, then Jackson going out again with the briefcase and returning once more. Jackson had not reported the absence at once. He assumed a washroom visit. Only near midnight, when he needed the berth and still held the briefcase he believed contained the ticket, did he speak to the conductor. 5 minutes later, at Santa Barbara, the Los Angeles yardmaster wired and impounded the baggage, taking names. No one else had been out there. The man had simply fallen. They were sunk. It was on the up and up. Keyes challenged why they would not simply pay if everything was clean. But Norton paused, noting that while he and the police leaned that way, enough suicide evidence still existed that he owed the stockholders a court test. He might be wrong. Before trial, more might surface. He would let a jury decide, and if it ruled against them, he would pay gladly. But he could not hand her the money as a gift. Keyes shot back that alleging suicide would amount to exactly that. Norton answered only that they would see. Keyes echoed the words with a grim finality that tasted like ash. Huff walked back with Keyes to his office. The investigator snapped on the lights. At once, Keyes declared he had handled too many claims to mistake this one. Instinct told him it was murder. The police might have covered the porter and sworn no one went outside. But how could they rule out someone swinging a board from the tracks? He stopped, stared straight at Huff, then erupted in a torrent of curses and rage, pounding the desk. Hadn't he warned Norton to strike at her immediately, to order her arrest before the inquest? Hadn't he said it again and again? Huff's heart slammed against his ribs. What did he mean? Keyes was shouting now. The dead man had never been on the train at all. Someone had taken his crutches and impersonated him the entire time. Of course, that accomplice had to get rid of Jackson. He could not risk being seen alive past the point where the body would be placed. And now those sworn identifications at the inquest stood against them like iron. Huff knew exactly what he meant. Those identifications had been part of his plan from the first hour. That was why he had taken such care that no one on the train got a good look at him. The crutches, the limp, the glasses, the cigar, and a little imagination had been enough. Keyes drove on about the inquest witnesses, how briefly they had glimpsed the man in darkness 3 or 4 days earlier. Then the coroner lifted the sheet, the widow identified the body, and naturally the rest followed. Now Norton's cautious approach made it impossible to challenge those statements. Any change in their stories could be crucified by lawyers. The moment to break the case had passed. The old man would have wrung a confession from her by now and sent her to Folsom for life. Instead, the company was reeling from sheer stupidity, $50,000 thrown away on willful blindness. The lights began to swim in front of Huff's eyes. Keyes kept dissecting the killing. The impersonator had left the car at Burbank and dropped off the train there. She had met him, and they had driven down in separate cars, the body in one of them, to the stretch of track. He had even worked out the timing. She would have had just enough margin to reach Burbank and still buy that pint of ice cream at the drugstore by 10:20. Wrong on the exact method, yet so close that Huff's lips turned cold and numb just listening. Huff forced his voice steady and asked what Keyes planned to do next. Keyes accepted Norton's wait-and-sue decision for now. It suited his own moves. While the boss chased suicide angles on the dead man, he would cover her every step, every move. Sooner or later, her accomplice would have to surface. The moment he knew the man's identity, the game would flip. let her sue. On the witness stand, Norton would choke on every word he had spoken, and the police might do some swallowing too. He was not finished yet. Huff felt the trap snap shut around him. If she sued and lost her nerve on the stand, God alone knew what might spill. If she held back, the refusal itself would look so suspicious it might drag the police in again. He dared not telephone her. For all he knew, the wires were already tapped. That night, as on the 2 nights before, while the inquest dragged on, he tried to drink himself under with a quart of cognac. The liquor did nothing. His legs felt loose, his ears rang, yet his eyes stayed fixed on the dark, and his mind kept hammering at the single question of what to do. Sleep would not come. Food held no taste. He could not even get drunk. The next evening after dinner, and with the houseboy just gone, the telephone rang. Fear clutched Huff's stomach, but he answered. It was Phyllis. He asked first where she was calling from. She told him a drugstore. Good, he said, go ahead. She explained Lola had been acting strangely. She no longer trusted her own phone and had driven down to the boulevard. He asked what was wrong with the girl. She called it hysteria, nothing more. The strain had simply been too much. He pressed her to speak quickly and tell him everything. A great deal had happened, she said. She had stayed home until today's funeral, which followed the inquest at once. Tomorrow, the state would open her husband's safe deposit box for the inheritance tax. The policy was inside. She had placed it there about a week earlier. Huff told her exactly what to do. At the lawyer's office, with the state taxman present by law, they would find the policy. She must hand it to the attorney and instruct him to file the claim immediately. But he warned her. They would not pay. They believed it was suicide and meant to force a lawsuit, letting a jury decide. She must not mention that to the lawyer yet. He would learn it soon enough and proceed. They would pay his fees. It was their only chance. One more thing, he added. They could not see each other. She protested that she wanted to. Impossible, he said. The suspicions ran deep. If they began meeting, the truth could break over them in a heartbeat. She must not contact him at all unless it was urgent. And even then only from a drugstore phone, never the same one twice. She remarked that he sounded scared. He admitted it, plenty scared. They knew more than she realized. Then it was really serious? Perhaps not yet, but they had to be careful. Maybe she should not sue after all. No, she had to sue. If she did not, they were finished. She seemed to take that in. Then she asked whether he still loved her, whether he thought of her all the time. He told her yes, without hesitation. Was there anything else? Not that he knew of. That was all on his end, too. Phyllis confirmed she thought so. Huff told her to hang up before anyone walked in. She sounded wounded, as though he were pushing her away on purpose. He answered that it was nothing but plain common sense. All right, she asked how long this separation would have to last. He admitted he had no idea. It might drag on for quite some time. She confessed she was dying to see him. The same hunger burned in him, yet caution clamped down hard. They exchanged brief goodbyes, and the line went dead. He set the receiver down. The love he felt for her coiled tight inside him like a rabbit staring into the eyes of a rattlesnake. That night he did something he had not done in years. He prayed. Roughly a week later, Nettie slipped into his private office and closed the door behind her. Miss Nerdlinger was here to see him again. He told her to hold the visitor a moment. He needed to make a call first to steady himself. She stepped out. He dialed home and asked a Filipino houseboy whether any calls had come through. None. That small reassurance helped. He buzzed Nettie to send the girl in. Lola entered, looking markedly changed from their last meeting. Where she had once seemed like a kid, she now carried herself like a woman. The black morning dress explained part of it, but anyone could see the ordeal had aged her. Huff felt like a heel, yet a strange warmth stirred that this girl still liked him, still trusted him. He shook her hand, seated her, and asked after her stepmother. She replied that Phyllis was all right, considering everything. He murmured that it had been a terrible thing, and the news had shocked him deeply. Then he inquired about Mr. Sacchetti. She preferred not to talk about him. He had thought they were friends. She repeated she would rather not. He apologized. She rose, gazed out the window a moment, then sat again. She reminded him that he had once done something for her. Or at least she had felt it was for her. It had been, he confirmed. Since then, she had always thought of him as a friend. That was why she had come. To talk to him as a friend. Certainly, he said, but only as a friend, not in his insurance capacity. Until she sorted her own mind, it had to remain in the strictest confidence. Did he understand? He did. She added she was forgetting. She was supposed to call him Walter, and he was to call her Lolo. It felt strangely easy to be with him, she said. Go ahead, he invited. It was about her father. Yes, her father's death. She could not shake the feeling that something lay behind it. Huff kept his voice even and asked how she meant. Back of it? She admitted she did not know what she meant exactly. Had she been at the inquest? One or two witnesses and several people afterward had hinted that her father might have killed himself. Was that what she meant? No, Walter, it was not. Then what? She could not bring herself to say it outright. The thought was too awful, because this was not the first time such suspicions had tormented her. It had happened before, with her mother's death. That was exactly how she had felt then. Huff waited while Lola swallowed hard 2 or 3 times, looking as if she might stop altogether, then changed her mind and pushed on. She described how her mother had suffered from lung trouble, which was why they kept a small cabin up at Lake Arrowhead. One midwinter weekend, her mother had gone there with her closest friend. The place was alive with winter sports, yet the 2 women decided to stay longer. Her mother wired her father, who sent money and told her to remain as long as she liked, believing the mountain air would help. Wednesday that week, her mother came down with pneumonia. By Friday, she was critical. The friend walked 12 miles through deep snowdrifts and woods to fetch a doctor. The cabin sat isolated on the far side of the lake. The woman reached the main hotel so spent she collapsed and had to be hospitalized herself. The doctor finally arrived. Her mother was already dying and lasted only half an hour. Huff felt the old warning prickle climb his spine into his scalp. He knew the answer before she asked. She pressed on. Who had that best friend been? He kept his face blank and said he had no idea. Phyllis, she told him. Then the question spilled out. Why had the 2 women stayed alone in that remote shack through the dead of winter instead of going to the hotel like everyone else? Why wire instead of telephone? Why had Phyllis trudged 3 hours through snow when she could have skated across the lake in 30 minutes? She was an excellent skater. Or stopped anywhere to phone. Why wait so long to call for help? Huff tried to interrupt gently. What had her mother said to the doctor when he reached her? Nothing, Lola answered. The woman had been delirious, and the doctor had her under oxygen within minutes. But a doctor was a doctor, he pointed out, and pneumonia was pneumonia. Lola cut in sharply. A doctor was a doctor, yet he did not know Phyllis. She was a trained nurse, one of the best in Los Angeles. That was how she had first met her mother during a long illness. She specialized in lung cases. She could time a crisis almost to the minute, and she knew exactly how to induce pneumonia. Did he honestly believe Phyllis would not drag a sick woman outside into the freezing night and lock her out until she was half dead? That was exactly what she had done. Everyone else saw only the sweet, gentle widow who had heroically hiked for help. Her father had married her less than a year later, convinced of her goodness. But Lola knew better. The same dark instinct had gripped her the moment she first heard the story. And now, with her father's death, the pattern repeated. Huff asked quietly what she wanted him to do. "Nothing yet," she said. "Just listen." It was a grave accusation, or at least a shadow of one. He understood what she was driving at. Yes, that was precisely what she meant. Still, as he reminded her, her mother had not been with her father at the time. No, but she had been with Phyllis. He asked for time to think it over. She agreed. He noted she seemed overwrought today. She admitted she had not told him everything. When he pressed, she faltered and said she could not bring herself to speak the rest. Never mind, she apologized for bursting in like this. She was simply so unhappy. Had she told anyone else? Not a word, ever. He advised her to keep it that way, especially from her stepmother. She was not even living at home anymore. She had taken a small apartment in Hollywood on the modest income from her mother's estate. She could no longer bear being under the same roof. He told her he would let her know when to come back and ask for her number. Huff spent the rest of the afternoon wrestling with whether to tell Keyes. He knew he should, for his own safety. The story would never hold up in court, and no judge would allow it anyway. People were tried for one crime at a time, not for something someone suspected years earlier. But if Keyes ever learned he had sat on this and said nothing, it would look damning. Still, he could not bring himself to speak. The only reason that mattered was that the girl had begged him to keep her confidence, and he had given his word. Around 4 o'clock, Keyes stepped in and closed the door. He had news. The man in the Nerdlinger case had surfaced. Huff's stomach tightened. Who? Keyes would not name him yet, only that he was a steady visitor now, 5 nights in the past week. He was the one. Now they would watch. That night, Huff returned to the office after hours. The moment the night watchman Joe Pete finished his 8 o'clock round on the floor, he slipped into Keyes' office. The desk was locked, the steel cabinets locked. None of his keys worked. He was ready to quit when he spotted the dictation machine. A cylinder still sat on it, 3/4 used. He checked that Joe Pete was downstairs, then fitted the earpieces and started the record. Routine letters and instructions droned first. Claimants, arson investigators, a clerk being fired. Then the voice shifted. Memo to Mr. Norton regarding Agent Walter Huff. Confidential Nerdlinger file. On the suggestion of placing Huff under surveillance because of possible connection to the case, Keyes disagreed completely. In every such claim, the agent fell under suspicion automatically, and he had taken the usual quiet steps. Every statement Huff had given checked against the facts, company records, and the dead man's own papers. He had even verified Huff's whereabouts the night of the death without his knowledge. Home all night. That cleared him. A man of Huff's experience would spot any tale at once, and they would lose his willing help, which had already proved useful and might become essential. His past record on fraud cases was outstanding. Keyes strongly recommended dropping the idea. Huff lifted the needle and replayed it. Relief flooded him, yet something deeper twisted in his chest. After more routine matter came the next entry. Confidential Nerdlinger summary, investigators' verbal reports for the week ending June 17th. Lola Nerdlinger had moved out of the family home on the 8th and taken a 2-room apartment at the Lycée Arms on Yucca Street. No surveillance needed. The widow stayed home until the 8th, then drove out, stopped at a drugstore to make a call, repeated short drives the next 2 days, visited markets and a women's shop. On the night of the 11th, a man arrived at the house at 8:35 and left at 11:48. Tall, dark, 26 or 27. The visits repeated on the 12th, 13th, 14th, and 16th. The man had been followed after the first visit, and identified as Beniamino Sacchetti of the Lilac Court Apartments on North La Brea Avenue. Huff realized he could no longer risk bringing Lola to the office, but knowing they had assigned no one to watch her opened a safer path. He telephoned and asked if she would join him for dinner. She said she would like nothing better. He drove her down to the Miramar in Santa Monica, claiming it would be pleasant to eat with the ocean in view. The real reason was to stay far from downtown where someone might recognize him. They talked through the meal about her school days, why she had never gone to college, ordinary things. The conversation felt feverish under the strain they both carried, yet it flowed easily. Just as she had said before, something between them made talk feel simple. He waited until they were back in the car, heading north along the ocean, before he brought up what she had told him last time. He had thought it over carefully. She asked if she could speak first. Of course. She had wrestled with it alone and reached a conclusion. She had been wrong. It was easy, when you loved someone deeply and they were suddenly taken, to blame someone else, especially someone you already disliked. She did not like Phyllis. Part of it was jealousy. She had been devoted to her mother and almost as much to her father. When he married Phyllis, it felt impossible, and those old suspicions hardened into certainty. They doubled when her father died. But she had nothing solid to stand on. It had been painful to face. Yet she had. She was letting the whole idea go and hoped he would forget she had ever spoken of it. Huff told her he was glad in a way. She guessed he must think she was terrible. No, he answered. He had waited even more carefully because it would matter greatly to the company if it held any weight. But it was only suspicion. That was all she had. Huff let the silence stretch while Lola insisted she no longer had even that scrap of proof. He reminded her quietly that anything she might tell the police was already public record. Her mother's death, her father's death, nothing new to add. Why stir it up? She saw the sense in that. If he were in her place, he would do nothing. She asked whether he agreed she had nothing solid to go on. He did. That closed the subject, yet inside him the need sharpened. He had to learn the truth about Sacchetti without letting her suspect he was digging. He asked what had really happened between her and the young man. She repeated she did not want to talk about him. How had they met? Through Phyllis. His father had been a doctor. Phyllis, the former nurse, had been approached about some medical association. But once Sacchetti turned his attention to Lola, he stopped coming to the house. When Phyllis learned of the meetings, she fed her father vicious stories about the boy. Lola had defied the ban anyway. Something lay behind it all. She had felt it from the start, though she never understood until he pressed her. Until what? She tried to pull back, insisting she had dropped the whole idea. He would not let it drop until her father died. Then suddenly, Sacchetti lost all interest in her. He was seeing Phyllis now. Huff felt the pieces locked together in his chest. Could she not see what that suggested? Did he have to force her to say it? She thought maybe the two of them had done it. Maybe his pursuit of her had been nothing but a blind, a cover, while he met Phyllis, in case they were caught. Huff reminded her gently that Sacchetti had been with her that night. He was supposed to be, she said. There had been a university dance. She went, expecting to meet him. But he sent word he was sick, a dreadful cold, and could not come. Instead, she caught a bus to a picture show. She had never told anyone that. Later that night, Huff sat alone in the dark, staring into nothing. He had killed a man for money and a woman. He had neither. The woman was a killer through and through, and she had played him for a fool, using him as a tool so she could reach another man. She held enough over him to hang him high. If Sacchetti shared the secret, two of them could send him to the rope. A hysterical cackle broke from his throat in the empty room. Then his thoughts turned to Lola. How sweet she was, how monstrous what he had done to her. He began subtracting ages. She was 19, he 34, 15 years between them. If she was nearly 20, the gap shrank to 14. Suddenly, he sat bolt upright and switched on the light. The truth hit him clean and cold. He was in love with her. Right after that, Phyllis filed her claim. Keyes denied liability at once, citing that the accident had never been proven. She sued through the family's regular lawyer. She phoned Huff half a dozen times, always from drugstores. Each time his stomach turned at the sound of her voice, yet he could not risk cutting her off. He told her to brace herself. They would probe beyond suicide. He did not reveal everything Keyes suspected or every move the investigators had made, but he warned her murder would be on the table when she reached the stand. She barely blinked. She acted as though the company were simply cheating her out of money that was hers. By right, as though the killing itself had slipped her mind. That suited him perfectly. It was the exact frame of mind he needed her in when she faced the corporation lawyers. If she stuck to her story, even against whatever Keyes might unearth, he still saw no way she could lose. The whole process dragged a month. The trial was set for early fall. During those weeks, Huff saw Lola 3 or 4 nights out of 7. He would pick her up at the little apartment house, take her to dinner, then drive along the coast. She had her own small car now, but they almost always used his. He had gone completely mad for her. The constant shadow of what he had done to her father twisted the feeling deeper. Yet it was not only guilt. There was something so pure and easy between them. They were happy together. He knew it in his bones, and he felt it in her too. One night, they parked on the ocean road 3 miles above Santa Monica, one of those pull-offs where you can sit and watch the Pacific. The coast ran almost due east-west there, so when the moon rose, it lifted straight out of the sea to their left, silver and perfect. As soon as it cleared the water, she slid her hand into his. He took it, but she drew away fast. She must not do that, she said. Why not? Lots of reasons. It wasn't fair to him, for one. Had he complained? She asked if he liked her. He was crazy about her. He was crazy about her. She was pretty crazy about him, too. She did not know what she would have done without him these past weeks. Only she warned it might hurt him. Better to hear it than guess. It was about Nino. He still meant a lot to her. Had she seen him? She hesitated, then admitted she had, though she had not spoken to him. He did not know she had followed. She had trailed them many times, half insane with it. Last night, she finally got close enough to hear. They had parked at the lookout. She crept up behind. It was awful enough. Sacchetti told Phyllis he had loved her from the first but thought it hopeless. Until this happened. They talked money, too. He had spent every cent Huff had given him and still lacked his degree. He had paid for the dissertation, but the rest went to her. Now he was asking where the next money would come from. Lola's fingers tightened like steel on Huff's arm. If the two of them had done it together, she would have to give him money, wouldn't she? Yet they never mentioned it. That was when her heart had pounded with the meaning. They stayed nearly an hour, talking of everything else, and from every word she could tell he had no part in it, knew nothing about it. He had not done it. She was trembling with excitement. Huff could not quite follow at first. Then the real weight struck him. This meant far more than Sacchetti's innocence. She said she would never give up the idea. Yes, she had tried to drop it, but only because she believed he must have been involved, and that had been too terrible to bear. Now she knew he was clean. She had not given up at all. Phyllis had done it somehow, she was certain. And now she would get her. She would get her for it if it was the last thing she ever did. How? The suit was coming. Phyllis had the nerve to sue the company. Fine. Huff should tell his people not to worry. She would sit right beside him in court. She would tell them exactly what questions to ask. She would give them everything they needed. There was plenty more she had never spoken of. She would have them ask about the time she walked in on Phyllis in the bedroom, wearing some ridiculous red silk thing that looked like a shroud, face painted dead white with red lipstick, dagger in her hand, making faces at herself in the mirror. And she would have them ask why. A week before her father died, Phyllis had been in a boulevard store pricing black dresses. That was something Phyllis did not know she knew. Lola had gone in 5 minutes after she left. Lola pressed on, her voice rising with fresh heat. The saleslady had been folding the black dresses away when she came in, praising them as lovely numbers but wondering aloud why Mrs. Nerdlinger would even consider morning wear. That was one reason Lola had begged her father to take the train trip, so she could slip out, follow the trail, and learn what Phyllis was really planning. She would tell the court everything, she swore. If they would not ask the questions, she would stand up herself and shout them at Phyllis. No judge, no officer, no one could silence her. She would drag the truth out if she had to climb into the witness box and choke it from her throat. Huff cut in fast, warning that she could not do any of that. They would never let such questions stand. Lola's eyes flashed. She would do it anyway. She would rise in open court and scream the facts until the whole room heard. Nothing would stop her. That was the exact instant the decision locked inside him. He had sensed for days that killing Phyllis was inevitable. Ever since the night he first understood she held his life in her hands and the world was too small for two people carrying that kind of secret. But the when, the where, and the how crystallized right then, in the car with the moon still silver on the water and Lola's fury burning beside him. Because if she walked into that courtroom and unleashed everything she knew, Phyllis would strike back with the one truth that would destroy them both. The thought was unbearable. His feeling for Lola had never been like the fever that once seized him at the sight of Phyllis. This was quieter, deeper, a sweet, steady peace that settled over him the moment they were together. They could drive for an hour without a word, then she would glance up, and the silence itself felt complete. He hated what he had done to her father, yet the longing grew stronger every day. If he could make certain she never learned the truth, he might marry her, bury the past, and live out his life in that peace. Only one person stood in the way now. Sacchetti was clean. Lola herself had proven it, so only Phyllis remained. And the things Lola had just sworn to do in court meant he had to move before the trial opened. He would arrange it so Sacchetti could never come back and take her from him. The police were hard to fool, but Lola would always carry the doubt. If Sacchetti had killed once, in her mind, he could have killed twice. The next morning at the finance company, Huff pushed through the usual paperwork, sent the file clerk on an errand, and pulled Sacchetti's folder from the drawer. Inside lay the spare key to the young man's car, the one every borrower left with the loan papers to prevent trouble on repossession. He had taken it out the previous winter. Huff slipped the key into his pocket, went to lunch, and had a duplicate cut. When he returned, he sent the clerk out again, replaced the original, and slid the folder back exactly as he had found it. No one knew he had touched it. He now held the key to Sacchetti's car, and the trail led nowhere. He waited for Phyllis to call. 3 nights he stayed home, nerves tight. On the 4th, the telephone rang. He told her they had to meet to review every detail of the suit so that afterward nothing could touch them. She sounded impatient, reminding him he had forbidden meetings. He explained he had new information. The company had cut the watchers down to a single man who went off duty at 11. They had run 3 shifts at first, but found little and trimmed the cost. Now only one man covered her in the afternoon and left at 11 unless something kept him. They could safely meet after that. She started to suggest her house. No, he said quickly. Too risky. Tomorrow night, around midnight, she must slip out. Take the car, but first get rid of any evening visitors well before 11. Turn every light off, make the place look as if she had gone to bed early, so the watcher would have no reason to linger. She agreed. He gave her the exact spot. Griffith Park, 200 yards up Riverside Drive from Los Feliz. He would be parked there waiting. She should leave her car in the little glade near the bridge and among the trees where he could see her, then walk over. Not on Los Feliz itself, too open. 12:30 sharp. He would arrive a minute or two early so she could step straight in. She repeated the directions. He added one last detail. He had traded his old car since they last met. He described a new one, a small dark blue coupe. She would spot it easily. She paused, then said it was funny. He knew why, but he let nothing show. He answered that the big car had grown too expensive. This one was a good deal. She laughed softly and called it the funniest thing she had ever heard. He brushed it off. Tomorrow night at 12:30. She said she was dying to see him. Same here, he told her. She mentioned she had something else to talk about, but it could wait until then. They said goodbye. Huff hung up and reached for the evening paper. He scanned the theater listings until he found exactly what he needed. A downtown house running a midnight show that would hold over all week. That would anchor his alibi for the next night. He drove straight there. By 10:30 he was inside, choosing the balcony so the downstairs ushers would never notice him. He sat through the picture with total attention, memorizing every gag and turn, because tomorrow he would need to talk about it as if he had just seen it fresh. In the final reel, an actor he knew appeared, a waiter part. Huff had once placed a $7,000 endowment policy on him, fully paid up. Jack Christoph. The face locked in his mind like a gift. He stayed until the lights came up and checked his watch. 12:48. The next day, around lunchtime, he put through a call to the studio and caught Christoph between takes. He opened with easy praise for the new picture, Gunplay, saying he had heard it knocked them cold. Christoph asked if he had caught it yet. Not yet, but he meant to, and where was it showing? The actor rattled off 5 houses. Huff pitched another small policy on the new money rolling in. Christoph sounded interested, but unsure. He was tied up until Friday, then a weekend rest. Still, next week might work. Huff steered the talk to evenings and floated tomorrow night. Christoph told him to ring the house around dinner time, 7 o'clock. He would know then if he could meet. That single call locked the reason for tonight's picture. He had to see Christoph's work so he could talk it up tomorrow and keep the actor feeling generous. Around 4, he drove up through Griffith Park, studying every curve and rise for the plan. He chose the exact parking spot for his own car and the spot where Sacchetti's car would wait. They lay close enough, yet his was right beside the bridle path cutoff. The path snaked through the hills but climbed straight above this stretch and rejoined the automobile road high up. The park was really a scenic drive for cars and a winding trail for riders. Foot traffic stayed away. The move was simple. Let her climb in, then head up the grade. At the first small lookout platform, graded flat for a view, he would swing in as if to park and talk. Only he would not park. The car would roll off the edge while he jumped clear. The instant his feet hit the bridle path, he would sprint downhill to his own car and drive home. Road distance from Sacchetti's parking spot to the drop was 2 miles of lazy curves. The bridle path cut straight across, barely 100 yards. Less than a minute after the crash, he would be gone, long before any crowd gathered. He climbed the hill and picked the precise lookout. A narrow one for just 1 or 2 cars, no stone wall. He stepped out and peered over. 200 feet straight down, then another 100 where the wreckage would tumble and roll. He rehearsed it once, ran to the edge, slipped the gear to neutral, shoved the door wide. He noted to leave his own door only half latched when she entered, so he could fling it open fast. She might claw for the emergency brake and save herself, or he might miss the jump and go over with her. Either risk was acceptable. On this one, you rolled the dice. He ate dinner alone at a big downtown seafood place. The waiter recognized him. Huff traded a quick joke to stamp the night as Friday in the man's memory. When he finished, he drove to the office and told Joe Pete he had work to finish. He stayed until 10. The night watchman was at his desk with a detective magazine when Huff passed. Joe Pete remarked on the late hours. Huff said he was not done yet, heading home to finish, then out to catch a picture. There was an actor named Jack Christoph. He had to talk insurance with tomorrow night, and he needed to see the man's new film first. No time tomorrow. Joe Pete chuckled about how actors loved themselves. He parked near the theater, killed time until 11, then bought a downstairs ticket. He slipped the program into his pocket. The date was printed plain. He still needed one more touch, an usher who would remember him and the day. He picked the girl at the entrance door, where the lobby light fell full on his face. He asked if the feature had started. "Just ended," she said. "Next showing at 11:20. He already knew that he had timed his arrival for the wait. He complained about the long gap and asked if Christoph was in the whole picture. "Only the last part," she told him. He groaned that he would have to sit till 1 in the morning for that ham. She offered to refund if he came back tomorrow night. "Tomorrow's Saturday," he checked. "Yes." "Nope." He said no good. He had to see it tonight. That fixed the day in her mind. One more touch. The night was hot. Her uniform collar was open at the top button. He reached up quick and buttoned it for her. She startled. He told her she ought to be more careful. She shot back that she was not about to drip sweat just to suit him, and popped it open again. He knew she would remember the stranger who had done that. Once the aisle usher seated him, he shifted across the house, waited a beat, then slipped out the side exit. Later, he would swear he stayed to the end. He had Christoph for the business reason, Joe Pete in the log for the night, the usher for the hour and the date. The alibi was not airtight, no alibi ever was, but it was solid enough for any jury and carried no smell of murder. He got back in the car and drove straight to Griffith Park. At that hour, the streets were clear, and he made good time. He checked his watch when he arrived, 11:24. He parked, killed the engine, pocketed the key, and switched off the lights. Then he walked over to Los Feliz and down the half-mile to Hollywood Boulevard, moving briskly. He stepped onto the boulevard at 11:35, boarded the first streetcar, and took a seat up front. When they reached La Brea, it was 5 minutes to 12. Timing was still perfect. Huff stepped off the streetcar and walked a short distance to the Lilac Court Apartments. The place was one of those cheap bungalow courts. 2 rows of one-room shacks facing a narrow central walk, renting for about $3 a week. He entered from the front entrance, moving openly so no one would mistake him for someone sneaking around. He passed straight down the lane past number 11. A light glowed inside Sacchetti's bungalow. Good. Exactly as he needed it. He continued through to the rear auto court where the tenants parked. Whatever wrecks they owned. A ragged lineup of 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 9th-hand cars sat there, and in the middle was Sacchetti's. Huff slid in, fitted the duplicate key into the ignition, and started the engine. He switched on the lights and began to back out. Headlights swept in from the street as another car pulled into the court. He turned his face away from the glare and eased the car out onto the road. He drove up to Hollywood Boulevard. The dashboard clock read exactly 12. He checked the gas gauge. Plenty. He drove easy, careful not to arrive too early, and still he reached Griffith Park by 12:18. To kill the extra minutes, he looped up toward Glendale. His mind drifted to Sacchetti and the alibi the young man would try to claim. Home in bed was the weakest story imaginable without proof. Phone calls, a neighbor sighting, anything. Sacchetti had no phone, nothing. Past the railroad tracks, he turned back, eased along Riverside a short distance, then swung the car to face Los Feliz and parked. He killed the engine and the lights. 12:27. He glanced over his shoulder. His own car sat about 100 yards behind, dark and waiting. He peered into the little glade near the bridge. No sign of Phyllis's car. She had not arrived. He held his watch in his palm. The second hand crept to 12:30. Still nothing. He pocketed the watch. A twig snapped in the bushes to his right. He flinched. He cranked down the passenger window and stared out into the dark foliage, straining to see what had moved. A full minute passed in silence. Another crack, closer. Then a muzzle flash tore the night and something slammed into his chest like a heavyweight's right cross. The crack of the shot followed a heartbeat later. Pain bloomed hot and deep. He understood in the same instant. He had come to kill her, but she had come to kill him first. The world really was too small for two people who knew each other's secret. He slumped back against the seat. Footsteps pounded away into the darkness. There he sat, bullet through his chest, behind the wheel of a stolen car belonging to the very man Keyes had shadowed for the past month and a half. He dragged himself upright by the steering wheel, reached for the key, then remembered he had to leave it in the ignition. He fumbled the door open. Sweat broke cold across his forehead from the effort of turning the handle. Somehow he got his feet on the ground and began staggering up the road toward his own car. His legs refused to track straight. Every few steps the weight in his chest begged him to sit, to collapse, but he knew if he went down he would never rise again. He fished his own car key from his pocket, reached the coupe, hauled himself inside, jammed the key home, and hit the starter. That was the last thing he remembered that night. Coming out of ether happened in slow stages. First, a faint gray light crept into one corner of his mind, dim and hazy. It spread gradually while his lungs fought to expel the stuff, forcing out groans that sounded like pain, but were only the effort to clear his chest. Deep inside, though, awareness held steady. He knew he was not alone. Voices murmured nearby, words not yet clear. Then a woman's voice told him to open his mouth for a little ice. It would help. He obeyed. The chill soothed his tongue. A nurse, he decided. He lay still a long while, piecing it together. Finally, he cracked his eyelids the smallest fraction, just enough to glimpse the room before shutting them again. Hospital. Daylight. A table crowded close to the bed held trays and instruments. Bandages bulked thick over his chest. The nurse sat beside the table watching him. Behind her, someone else waited. He did not need to see the face to know. Keyes. For what felt like an hour, he kept his eyes closed, mind racing as far as the ether allowed. Every attempt to force more anesthetic from his lungs brought a sharp stab through his chest, the bullet wound. He stopped struggling. The nurse spoke gently. He answered when he had to. Keyes stepped closer. That theater program had saved him, Keyes said. The folded wad of paper in his pocket had slowed the bullet just enough. It had grazed his lung. He would bleed a little, but it had missed the heart by 1/8 of an inch. Another fraction, and he would have been finished. They had recovered the bullet? Yes. And the woman? Yes. Huff said nothing. He lay still, certain it was over for him anyway. Keyes added that he had plenty to tell, that this whole thing was a honey of a case, but first he needed breakfast. Give him half an hour. Maybe Huff would feel stronger then. He left without anger, without accusation, as if nothing had changed between them. An orderly appeared soon after. Huff asked for a newspaper. The man returned with one and opened it to the right page. Not front page news, but second section. Local items not quite hot enough for the banner. The headline read, "Mystery Shrouds Griffith Park Shooting. 2 held after Walter Huff. Insurance man is found wounded at wheel of car on Riverside Drive after midnight." Police were investigating the shooting of Walter Huff, Los Feliz resident and insurance agent, discovered unconscious behind the wheel in Griffith Park shortly after midnight, a bullet in his chest. 2 persons were detained pending his condition. Lola Nerdlinger, 19, of the Lycee Arms Apartments on Yucca Street, and Benamino Sacchetti, 26, of the Lilac Court Apartments on La Brea Avenue. Huff had apparently been shot while driving along Riverside from the Burbank direction. Officers arriving soon after found Miss Nerdlinger and Sacchetti at the car attempting to remove him. A pistol lay nearby with 1 chamber fired. Both denied firing the shot and declined further comment. They brought him orange juice. He stared at the ceiling, turning it over. Did they really think he would swallow that Lola or Sacchetti had shot him? Jealousy, some lover's quarrel? No. He knew who had pulled the trigger. He had arranged the meeting. She had known exactly where he would be and why. She had beaten him to it. But what were those 2 doing there? Lola must have been trailing Sacchetti again, convinced he was meeting Phyllis. That explained her presence. But Sacchetti? Nothing fit, and underneath it all sat the cold certainty that he was finished. Not only for what he had done, but for what Lola would soon learn. That cut deepest. Near noon, Keyes returned. He spotted the newspaper and drew a chair close to the bed. He had been down to the office. A wild morning on top of a wild night. Then he dropped the news Huff had never heard. Sacchetti, the same man who had shot him, was the one they had been tailing all along in the Nerdlinger case. Keyes had started to tell him once, but Norton had clamped down on confidentiality with agents. He had tried to warn them something smelled wrong. Huff's finance company had called too. If they had trusted him fully from the start, he could have told them what they only learned today, the key to the entire case. Sacchetti had taken out a car loan, but that was not the important part. The important part was that he had been in Huff's office the very day Huff delivered the accident policy to Nerdlinger. Keyes leaned in closer, his voice dropping low against the hum of the hospital room. He had checked every angle. Nettie's memory, the finance company logs, the policy department files. Sacchetti had been in Huff's office that day, and so had the daughter. That was the connection they had hunted for all along, the missing hook that tied everything together. Huff felt the words land like stones in his gut. What hook? Keyes pressed on. They knew Nerdlinger had kept the policy secret from his family. The secretary had confirmed it. No one in the household had been told. Yet the family had known anyway. They had not targeted him blindly, and now the pieces fit. The girl and Sacchetti had been right there when Huff delivered the policy. That explained how the knowledge leaked. Huff tried to deflect. Any court would assume the family knew eventually. Keyes shook his head. This was not about court yet. This was about certainty, about his own instinct finally locking into proof. He could push for an investigation on gut alone, but he never took a case to trial without knowing. Now he knew, and it dragged the daughter in too. Huff's chest tightened at the mention. The girl? Keyes nodded grimly. Lola had been in the office with Sacchetti. It sounded impossible, a daughter plotting against her own father, but Keyes had seen it before. $50,000 turned people into strangers to their own blood. It had happened plenty of times. It would happen again. Huff forced the denial through numb lips. He could not believe it. Keyes answered that he would believe it soon enough. But one piece still eluded them. They had put Huff on the spot because he could testify to something damning at the trial. What was it? Their presence in the office was not enough. There had to be more, something he knew, something he had forgotten, something trivial to him but lethal to them. Huff searched his mind and came up empty. Nothing. There could not be. Keys paced harder. The bed frame trembled under his steps. "Keep thinking," he urged. They had days. Huff could not appear at any hearing until next week at the earliest. That bought time. A little pressure from the police, a session with the rubber hose if necessary, and the pair would break. Especially the girl. She would crack soon. This was the break they had waited for. Tough on Huff, but now they could really hammer them. With luck, the case would close before nightfall. Huff shut his eyes. All he could see was Lola surrounded by cops, maybe roughed up, forced to confess something she knew nothing about. Her face flashed before him, then a fist struck it, and blood bloomed on her lip. Keys. Yeah? There was something. Now that you mention it. I'm listening, boy. I killed Nerdlinger. The room went still. Huff poured it out. Everything, even about Lola. It took perhaps 10 minutes. When he finished, Keys sat frozen, staring. Then he rose. Huff grabbed his arm. Keys. I've got to go, Huff. See that they don't beat her? I've got to go now. I'll be back later. Keys! If you let them beat her, I'll kill you. You've got it all now. I told you for one reason only, so they won't hurt her. Promise me. You owe me that much. Keys. Keys shook off the grip and walked out. Huff had hoped confession would bring some relief, some unburdening after months of carrying it in his sleep, his dreams, his every breath. No peace came, only the image of Lola learning the truth at last, seeing him for the monster he was. Around 3, the orderly brought the afternoon papers. Nothing yet about the confession, but the morning story had sent reporters digging into old files. They had pulled up the first Mrs. Nerdlinger's death, then Nerdlinger's, and now Huff shot in the park. A woman feature writer had reached Phyllis at home and come away calling the place the House of Death, lingering on the blood-red drapes. Once that kind of ink hit the streets, even a slow reporter could smell something rotten. It was 8:30 that night when Keys returned. He waved the nurse out, stepped into the hall a moment, then came back with Norton, Keswick, the corporation lawyer they used for major cases, and Shapiro from the legal department. They stood in a loose semicircle. Norton spoke first. Huff! Yes, sir. Have you told anybody about this? Nobody but Keys. Nobody else? Not a soul. God, no. No policemen here? They've been in the hall, whispering. The nurse wouldn't let them in. The men exchanged glances. Then they could begin. Keys started to speak, but Keswick cut him off, drew Norton aside. Words murmured. Something about a proposition, about witnesses, about who would carry the responsibility. Keswick favored the deal but wanted no fingerprints on it. They settled that Keys would handle it alone, on his own authority. The others slipped out without a word, without farewell. They did not behave as if Huff had betrayed them or the company. They acted as if he carried some disfiguring disease they preferred not to look at. Keys sat down. This was an awful thing Huff had done. Huff knew. No need to dwell on it. Keys had liked him. Same here. At his trade, you could not afford to like many people. The whole human race started looking crooked. Huff had let him down. They would not talk about it anymore. Had Keys seen her? Yes. All of them. Sacchetti, Lola, the wife. What had Lola said? Nothing. Keys had let her talk first. She still believed Sacchetti had shot Huff. Jealousy. She was upset about the injury, but when she learned it was not serious, relief mixed with something else. She tried to hide it, but she was glad in a way. It proved Sacchetti loved her. She could not help feeling that. Huff understood. She had been worried for him, too. She liked him. Yeah, Huff knew. She liked him. She had been following Huff that night, mistaking him for Sacchetti. That explained everything. Keyes began pacing again. The night light above the bed cast long shadows. Huff could feel the mattress quiver with each step. There was a story here. Huff had tangled with an Irrawaddy cobra. That woman made Keyes' blood run cold. A pathological case, the worst he had encountered. A what? Keyes urged him to read more modern psychology. It explained things in his line that nothing else could. Depressing, but clarifying. Sacchetti was not in love with her. He had known her 5 or 6 years. His father had run a sanatorium in the Verdugo Hills, a quarter-mile from where she was head nurse. Huff remembered. Keyes went on. Sacchetti had met her there. Then the old man hit bad luck. 3 children died on him. They died of... Keyes continued without pause, his voice steady in the dim hospital light. The 3 children had died of pneumonia. Huff had already heard the Arrowhead story. Keyes nodded. He had. The old doctor took the blame, not from the police. They found nothing criminal, but from the health department and his patients. The scandal destroyed him. He sold the sanatorium and died. Not long after, worn out by age. Huff pressed him on. Sacchetti had sensed something off about Phyllis from the start. She had lingered too much around the children, shown too keen an interest. No hard proof, just instinct. Then the first Mrs. Nerdlinger died, and one of those dead children turned out to be a distant relative. When that child passed, Mrs. Nerdlinger became executrix of a substantial inheritance, and soon inherited it outright herself once the legalities cleared. The other 2 children? Nothing. They died simply to muddy the trail, to disguise the targeted killing as a cluster of hospital negligence. Keyes shook his head at the cold calculation. Phyllis would murder 2 extras just to obscure the one she wanted. A true pathological case. When the first Mrs. Nerdlinger died, Sacchetti turned himself into a private investigator. He wanted to clear his father's name and unravel the woman who obsessed him. Not with desire, but with the need to expose her. He kept up his university work as best he could, then engineered an excuse to approach her. A proposal to join a new Physicians and Nurses Association. She already knew him, so it raised no suspicion. But then he met Lola. Love struck him instantly, and his careful plans shattered. He could not bear to hurt the girl or drag her into his suspicions without evidence. So he backed off. He avoided the house after what he believed about the wife and began meeting Lola elsewhere. One detail nagged at him. As soon as Phyllis learned of the meetings, she fed Lola wild lies about Sacchetti and persuaded Nerdlinger to forbid them. No real cause, except perhaps that Phyllis wanted no Sacchetti near her after the sanatorium history. Then Nerdlinger died. Sacchetti realized he had to confront the woman head-on. He stopped seeing Lola without explanation and began courting Phyllis aggressively, almost as hard as he knew how. If she thought he came for her, she would welcome him. As Lola's guardian, Phyllis controlled the property. If Lola married, the husband would take over. Marriage would complicate everything. Lola was next in line. Huff felt the confirmation settle like lead. After eliminating him for what he knew, Phyllis would have turned to Lola. Keyes brought it to last night. Lola had trailed what she believed was Sacchetti's car, Huff driving it. She turned into the parking area just as he pulled out. He had glimpsed headlights. Sacchetti himself had gone home early. Phyllis sent him away. He tried to sleep but could not shake the feeling something was brewing. Earlier that day, she had asked odd questions about Griffith Park. When the roads closed at night, which ones? It pointed to late-night plans there. Instead of bed, he decided to watch the house. When he went for his car and found it missing, panic hit. Lola had a key. He knew she was the next target. He grabbed a cab to Griffith Park and wandered blind, unsure what or when to watch. He started at the wrong end of the glade. Then the shot rang out. He ran toward it and reached Huff the same moment Lola did. Each thought the other had been hit. When Lola saw Huff, she assumed Sacchetti had fired in jealousy and played along when police arrived. Huff understood at last. That woman, Phyllis, was a complete lunatic. Sacchetti had uncovered 5 earlier cases, all before the 3 children, where patients died under her care as a nurse. 2 involved property she gained. 3 from pneumonia, the older 2 from operations. How did she do it? Sacchetti never learned exactly. He suspected she manipulated serum combined with another drug. He wished he could force the method from her. It might matter medically. Keyes met Huff's eyes. Huff was finished. Huff knew. They had hashed it out that afternoon at the company. Keyes held the upper hand. No debate. He had called murder from the beginning, even while Norton clung to suicide. Keyes had convinced them the case must never reach trial. They could not bury it entirely, but an agent committing murder was one thing. 2 weeks of headlines during a public murder trial was another disaster. Huff would provide a full statement, every detail of what he had done, signed before a notary and mailed registered to Keyes, arriving Friday. Thursday next week he would mail it. Until then, they held everything on the shooting. Huff was too injured to testify at any hearing. A steamer reservation waited under an alias, departing San Pedro Thursday night for Balboa and south. Huff would board it. Friday, Keyes would receive the statement and hand it to police, the first he knew of any confession. That was why Norton and the others had left without witnesses. The deal stayed between them. If Huff ever tried to expose it, Keyes would deny everything and prove no such arrangement existed. Huff would not try. Once police were notified, the company would post a reward for his capture. If caught, they would pay it, prosecute fully, and push for the rope if they could. No trial preferred, but if one came, they would see it through to the end. Before boarding, Huff must deliver the registry receipt to Keyes in person. What about her? Phyllis. Keyes had handled her. One last thing, Huff said. Lola. They were holding everything, meaning Sacchetti and her pending the hearing that would never happen. Huff needed Keyes' solemn promise no harm came to her. No statement otherwise. He would force a trial and burn everything down. Keyes met his gaze. They held Sacchetti. He had agreed. Lola was out. Bailable offense. Huff had not died. Did she know about him? No. Keyes had told her nothing. Keyes checked his watch, stepped into the hall. Huff closed his eyes. Then he sensed someone close. He opened them. Lola stood there. Walter. Yes, hello, Lola. She was terribly sorry. He was all right. She had not known Nino knew about them. He must have found out. He was hot-tempered. But he had not meant anything. Did she love him? Yes. Huff just needed to know. She was sorry he felt the way he did. It was all right. Could she ask something she had no right to? What? That he not prosecute. That he not appear against Nino. He did not have to, did he? He would not. Sometimes she almost loved him, Walter. She sat gazing at him, then leaned close. He turned his head away fast. Hurt crossed her face. She stayed a long time in silence. He did not look at her. Some kind of peace finally settled over him. He could never have her. He could never kiss the girl whose father he had killed. At the door, he said goodbye and wished her luck. Then Keyes returned. Huff agreed to the statement without hesitation. It was the best path forward. He thanked Keyes again, feeling the weight of it even as the words left him. Keyes brushed the gratitude aside with a strange glint in his eye. No reason for thanks. Perhaps, he added quietly, they would never catch Huff after all. Perhaps this was a favor in disguise. Maybe Huff would prefer it that way. The confession took 5 days to set down on paper. Huff finished it yesterday afternoon, Thursday, every detail laid bare. He sent the orderly to register it, and, around 5, Keyes came by for the receipt. It would be more than Keyes expected, far more, but Huff needed it all on record. Perhaps one day Lola would read it and understand how twisted everything had become. Perhaps she would not hate him quite so much. At 7, he dressed, still weak but able to stand and walk. After a quick meal, he called a taxi to the pier. He boarded the steamer, went straight to his stateroom, and stayed in bed until early afternoon today. The solitude pressed in too hard. He climbed to the deck, found his deck chair, and sat gazing at the Mexican coast sliding past. Yet a strange certainty gripped him. He was not going anywhere. His thoughts kept circling back to Keyes, to that final look, to the quiet meaning behind the words. Then abruptly, he understood. A small gasp sounded beside him. Before he turned, he already knew. Phyllis sat in the next chair. You. Hello, Phyllis. She remarked that his man Keyes was quite the matchmaker. Huff gave a dry laugh. Romantic, sure. He studied her. Her face looked drawn since the last time he had seen her, fine lines etched around her eyes. She handed him the ship's newspaper. Had he seen it? No, he had not bothered. What was in it? The wedding. Lola and Nino. The news had come over the radio just after noon. Keyes had given the bride away. They honeymooned in San Francisco. The company had even paid Nino a bonus. Huff felt the confirmation settle. So it was all out now. About them. Yeah, she said. A sensation. Passengers had poured over it at lunch. Good thing they traveled under different names. She did not seem frightened. She had been thinking of something else. Huff asked what. She smiled then. The sweetest, saddest smile he had ever seen. He thought of the 5 patients, the 3 children, the first Mrs. Nerdlinger himself, and now him. How could someone capable of such tenderness, when she chose, have done those things? They could be married, she said. They could. And then what? They sat in silence a long while, staring out to sea. She broke it again. Nothing ahead of them, was there? No. Nothing. She did not even know their destination. Did he? No. Then softly, the time had come for her to meet her bridegroom, the only one she had ever loved. One night she would slip off the stern. Little by little she would feel his icy fingers creep into her heart. Huff answered he would give her away. He would go with her. Keyes had been right. Huff owed him nothing. The man had simply spared the state the cost of a trial and an execution. They walked the deck. A sailor swabbed the gutter outside the rail, glancing nervously. He caught Huff looking. A shark followed the ship. Huff tried not to stare, but his eyes found it, a dirty white flash in the green water. They returned to the chairs. They would have to wait, she said, until the moon rose. She wanted to see that black fin slicing the water in the moonlight. The captain knew who they were. Huff had seen it in the man's face when he stepped out of the radio room earlier. It would have to be tonight. Before they reached Mazatlan, the captain would post a guard. The bleeding had started again. Internal, from the grazed lung. Not much, but he tasted blood when he spit. His mind kept returning to the shark. He wrote this now in the stateroom, 9:30. She was in hers, preparing. She had made her face chalk white, shadow black circles under her eyes, red on her lips and cheeks. She wore the red silk thing again, that awful square of fabric wrapped around her with no armholes. Her hands moved like stumps beneath it. She looked like the figure that boarded the ancient mariner's ship to dice for souls. He did not hear her door open, but she stood beside him now while he wrote. He felt her presence. The moon. The end. Thank you. Truly, thank you for staying with this story until the very last word. You've let it breathe in real time, let the tension build and the shadows lengthen, and that patience means more than you know. This has been Double Indemnity by James M. Cain, a tale that still feels sharp and dangerous more than 80 years after it first appeared. Cain was already a seasoned journalist and magazine writer when he turned to fiction in his 40s. He drew the spark for this novel, partly from tabloid headlines of the 1920s and early 1930s, insurance scams, lovers who murdered for money, the dark arithmetic of greed and desire that occasionally surfaced in California courtrooms. But he also pulled from deeper currents. The disillusionment that lingered after the First World War, the economic desperation of the Depression, and a hard-eyed fascination with how ordinary people could rationalize monstrous choices. Cain once said he wrote about people who were not very nice, yet he refused to moralize over them. He simply watched them walk straight into the trap they had built for themselves. The book came together quickly. Cain wrote in a clean, clipped style that mirrored the way his characters spoke and thought. He finished the manuscript in a matter of months, but publishers hesitated. The material was too cynical, too frank about sex and murder without the usual softening galls of punishment or redemption. Alfred A. Knopf eventually took it in 1936, and the novel found its audience almost immediately. Readers recognized something pitilessly accurate in its portrait of human weakness. The story arrived at a moment when America was still reeling from financial collapse and scanning the horizon for the next war. Hard-boiled crime fiction was already popular, Hammett, Chandler, but Cain stripped even more away. No detective solving the puzzle, no grand speeches about justice, just two people who think they are smarter than the system, and a third who sees through them from the beginning. The insurance angle itself was almost documentary. Cain had researched actuarial tables and claims procedures so the mechanics felt authentic. That cold precision made the passion underneath feel even more feverish. The novel was adapted for the screen almost at once. The 1944 film, directed by Billy Wilder and co-written by Wilder and Raymond Chandler, remains one of the definitive examples of film noir. Wilder stayed remarkably faithful to the spine of the book. The murder plot, the confession frame, the doomed lovers. Yet he and Chandler made significant changes. They restored the character of Barton Keyes, played with weary brilliance by Edward G. Robinson, to a much larger role than he has in the novel. They softened some of the book's bleakest edges, most notably the ending. In Cain's pages, Huff and Phyllis sail toward mutual destruction with a kind of exhausted inevitability. The film gives Huff a chance at confession and a sliver of redemption, partly because the production code demanded that crime not pay without consequence, and partly because Wilder wanted a note of tragic clarity rather than pure nihilism. Filming itself carried its own difficulties. Wilder struggled to translate the novel's first-person interior monologue into visual language without voiceover feeling clumsy, though the picture ultimately uses it masterfully. Locations were limited by wartime restrictions. Much of the film was shot on studio sets, yet Wilder and cinematographer John Seitz created a Los Angeles that feels both sunlit and suffocating. Fred MacMurray, best known for lighter roles, was cast against type as Walter Huff/Walter Neff. He later said he took the part because he wanted to prove he could play a heel. Barbara Stanwyck brought a glacial allure to Phyllis that still unsettles viewers today. Her anklet, the towel scene.
Wife. They had a bowl of those little red goldfish on the table behind the big Davenport. But to tell you the truth, Keys, I wasn't a whole lot interested in goldfish right then. Or in auto renewals or in Mr. Dietrichson and his daughter Lola. I was thinking about that dame upstairs and the way she had looked at me. And I wanted to see her again, close. Without that silly staircase between us.
Edward G. Robinson reportedly improvised some of Keyes' most memorable lines, including the cigar speech, giving the film its moral center. Billy Wilder would go on to direct classics that carried echoes of this story. Sunset Boulevard, The Apartment, Some Like It Hot, each one probing human frailty with the same surgical wit. His gift was making cynicism feel almost compassionate. A few small curiosities linger around the film. The original title card read, Double Indemnity in the Insurance Trade, but Paramount shortened it. Stanwyck wore the same blonde wig she had used in Ball of Fire, which gave Phyllis an oddly glamorous menace, and the production code forced Wilder to cut a line in which Phyllis says she loves murder, the way some people love music. Censors felt it went too far. If this retelling has stirred anything in you, unease, recognition, a shiver at how close the characters came to getting away with it, then I urge you to find James M. Cain's novel itself. The book is leaner, colder, and in some ways even more merciless than the film. The written word lets you sit inside Walter's head in a way no camera can fully replicate. You'll hear the rhythm of his thoughts, feel the trap close tighter with every page. If you've enjoyed listening, if the story stayed with you, please consider subscribing. It helps more tales like this find their way to ears that want them. And if you have thoughts about Walter's choices, Phyllis's smile, Keyes' final mercy, or anything the story stirred in you, leave them in the comments. Every perspective adds to the conversation. Share this with someone who might sit up late listening the way you did. Pass the story along. Stories like this one don't really end. They wait for the next person to pick them up. Thank you again for listening, for staying to the end. Sleep well. And maybe keep an eye on the moon tonight.